When I took the podium after Tim, the crowd was in high spirits. As I talked about Trump, a chant started, "Lock him up." I disliked the chant when Trump aimed it at Hillary, and I wasn't about to encourage it at my rallies. In the democracy I cherish, we don't lock people up because they're our political opponents. They're locked up if a jury determines they've committed serious crimes. As a former prosecutor, I know what it means to ask that somebody be locked up. I know the seriousness of depriving someone of their liberty. It's not something that I've ever taken lightly. I carried the moral weight of it. I would never reduce it to a chant to please and entertain a crowd.
So fucking corny, man. Come on. Just come on. Like, seriously, dude. One, pleasing and entertaining a crowd, that's the whole point of a rally.
Yeah.
That's like kind of like the thing you do there. You can say you don't like the lock her up thing without resorting to like these sacred halls. I have so much reverence for American institution stuff that nobody likes.
Like he led an insurrection on the Capitol. Like and liberals know that this is like a very serious thing that he did.
Yeah.
And
liberals ate it up, actually.
They're still going to be like, oh, but these sacred halls, though, this democracy that I cherish.
Like, why are you lecturing me for supporting you? Why are you lecturing me for supporting you in, like, I guess, like, somewhat of an edgy way? But that's only edgy, I guess, if you're somebody who's 60 years old and used to be a prosecutor and has immense reverence for American institutions.
Yeah, look, this is not saying that Democrats should resort to saying, like, I'm going to lock up my political opponents, right? Like, that is obviously not the position. It's just that the fact that this is the response to that sentiment in the crowd shows to me that, like, she doesn't actually understand why people are angry or how to use that anger for political ends.
Yeah.
And that's bad.
And it's also like there's a whole nother element to it once we get into like the main book review / read along that we're going to talk about after the intro rules, that it's like,
yeah, we're reading all the pages here.
These are the things that she chose to highlight.
Yeah.
She chose to put that in the book. She chose to write out that entire description, this whole thing about, oh, it being so bad. I know what the judicial system's like. She chose to highlight this. Why are you choosing to highlight this other than to just like lecture voters and make yourself seem morally superior to them?
Yeah.
That's why people don't fuck with Democrats.
And like she does say after that in the book, like, the courts are going to handle that part. But what she gets to after that is like, we're going to beat him in November. It's like, man,
you didn't.
This is lame. Well, like, you didn't, but like at the time she wouldn't have known. She expected to win, whatever. But it's like, why are you in your, and this isn't like a postmortem, right? That's not what the book is. But like, why are you in your reflections of what happened telling me that the obvious criminal doing criminal things, we shouldn't want to, like, you know, make him stop?
And it's like, yeah, this book isn't a postmortem, but sometimes it tries to be.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't know what it wants.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we should roll the intro.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. It is Monday, September 29th, and this is your HITO Book Club. We are doing a book review of 107 Days by Kamala Harris.
The highly anticipated return, the highly anticipated review, the highly anticipated takedown.
That's right. Oh, maybe a takedown.
Maybe. Who knows? You'll have to watch the review till its end to find out.
That's right. But before we get into it, of course, as usual, we will remind you, become a patron. Patrons heard this review first. And that's a big deal.
It's a really big deal, especially for big cultural events like this one.
Yeah.
This is the literary work of the decade, guys.
If you want to be in on stuff like this, you got to go become a patron. Patrons hear all of our stuff first over on patreon.com. Link is down there in the description. You can also support the show in a number of other ways. All the links are in the description for you. And lastly, you can leave a 5-star review.
Of course.
And those are very important. You know, we love doing reading on this show, especially this episode. But we're not only going to be reading the Kamala Harris book.
Of course not.
We're also going to be reading our reviews.
Just like we promise every single week on every single episode.
Yeah.
And this week, we have one on Apple and most on Spotify.
One on Apple. It's a good one on Apple, though. Here we go. From Abe Lark. Firstly, condemnations all around. It's a sorry world that a podcast can go even one episode without a 5-star review.
And frankly, that's what people aren't talking about right now. There's a lot of talk about ICE and affordability. People aren't talking about the podcasters that are being left by the wayside.
It's finally time to do my part, raising HITO's approval rating higher than Pete Buttigieg's. That's easy, though.
Yeah, that's easy. Hopefully it never gets that low.
Keep up the good work and remember that good things are good and bad things are bad.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful review. This next one on Spotify from PETA, 5 out of 5, enlightening. Shout out to my pal Benny for recommending the pod to me last year. year. I've learned so much from the boys and finally feel informed on current events. Who knew that it really is just as simple as good things are good and bad things are bad? Artfully mixing reporting, analysis, and comedy, every new episode of HITO is chicken soup for my mind, soul, and funny bone. XOXO, your newest patron.
Too true.
I am a slut for a good postcard. And you all should be, because those are going out soon.
I was going to say, speaking of postcards, we got all the postcards behind the camera over here. And the stickers came in because we did hit the sticker goal for this round of postcards.
Lovely.
So you all will be getting a postcard and a sticker. If you're signed up, make sure to do so. There's a recent post on Patreon for you to go and do that. If you're not already signed up, remember, $5 tier and up, get your name in there. Next review from Alicia, 5 out of 5 stars. First of all, I condemn Hamas in all forms of political violence. I'm a master's poli-sci student in Germany, and you guys are my leftist light in the darkness when I'm staying up to date on the dumpster fire that is currently U.S. politics, as well as geopolitics, #1 geopolitical podcast.
Big on that.
I found HITO in 2023, binged all episodes, and y'all have been my #1 listened to pod since. Keep up the great takes and bipartisan roasts. You make living through historical events every week much more bearable.
And we love to hear it. That's what we're here for on this podcast.
That's right.
This next one from Daniel Klein, 5 quadrillion real number out of 5 stars. Sup lads, I'm a leftist Brit who discovered you a week ago during an Instagram doom scroll. Now I've listened to a bunch of episodes and signed up on the Patreon. I've been very cathartically listening to you guys and also taking a break from my local rise of fascism. That's huge over there. P.S. If anyone wants a British deep dive in the Discord on the absurd collapse of our new left party, I've read so many niche blogs about it. I condemn kneecap, Hamas, and the IRA and all political violence. Interesting.
Damn, specifically the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act.
Wow. Joe Biden's landmark.
Joe Biden's landmark piece of legislation. I think that might be it in terms of the reviews. I don't see any others on here. Actually, no, wait, there's a 5-star from Bree, I think, with the 4-leaf clover. Shout out to y'all for helping an Appalachian leftist stay sane in this wacky world. Also, I will subscribe to the Patreon if y'all help me bully Cuck Fleischman, intentional misspelling.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is this?
Exactly.
Is this like an elected official we need on our radar?
And
let us know.
That's exactly what I've been wondering, because nobody knows who this guy is. Maybe. I don't know.
All right, then I think those are our reviews. Thank you all for leaving them. If you want your review read, go to Apple and or Spotify, leave a 5-star review, read it on this show.
And remember, we will be at the Southfield Public Library doing a little intro to podcasting thing again this Saturday at 1 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
this Saturday at 2 o'clock. That's October 4th, Southfield Public Library. Link is in the description if you want that. Also, our upcoming later in the month presentation with the Michigan Sociological Association Conference at Wayne State University. Also, link is in the description. Registration required for that second one, not for the first one.
Yes.
It's all down there for you to take a look at if you're interested in seeing HITO live.
If you want to pull up.
That's right. Let's get into the review here, though, and I want to start off with a couple of caveats.
And with that, my laptop's going away as we're going analog for this.
He's going analog. I still got my my iPad here because I got some notes on it. But I want to offer a few caveats to start off before we get into the meat of the book itself. First of all, I want to note that, of course, Kamala Harris, as a person that was a candidate for president, and specifically as a black woman who ran for president, receives a lot of unjustifiable hatred.
Yeah.
And our review of this book is not meant to be in any way bashing on her because of her identity or even indirectly related to her as a black woman, right? This is meant to be an analysis of a book written by the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party last year, and let's be honest, likely candidate for 2028. I am interested mostly in this book for what it means for the future. And again, none of this is meant to be bashing, and we will do our best to maintain this line.
Yeah, I think most of the problems here are obviously, yes, problems with Kamala Harris, but she's more so a representative of the bad parts of the party, as hopefully we'll outline and convince you of as we go through this.
And, you know, again, we'll get into it, but it seems like she is representative of the bad parts of the party, not even like on purpose.
No.
It's just having existed in the establishment for this long. Even though she was seen as a more progressive senator, like, it just sort of morphs you into a different kind of person.
Yeah, what too much Joe Biden does to somebody. And a lot of the problems here are really just of being from the Biden lineage.
Oh, dude, I got so many annotations for Biden. So many for Biden. I also want to note, just because I've been speaking with some people that I view as trustworthy in terms of politics over the last few days, I think people have, and this is no secret if you follow us on social media, people have been getting unhappy with us for our takes on the Democratic Party lately. And I don't know if it's like you guys listening that are sort of like unhappy with what we're saying about the Democrats, or if it's just random people seeing the videos. But what I want to say is that as we review this book, we're going to make generalizations about the establishment, quote unquote. But again, these generalizations are meant to critique the party as it exists at a national level, at an elite level. And this isn't saying anything about the Democrats maybe at a lower level that we actually think are good, right? Like there are people we like in the Democratic Party.
Of course.
Like Zohran Mamdani, cool guy.
Great guy.
AOC, cool person. There's lots of people at lower levels that are doing good things that even push back against the establishment. But again, this book, I think, is one manifestation of what the establishment looks like and needs to be criticized for that reason.
There really is sort of a peel behind the curtain of just like how establishment Democrats think.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of most interesting here. And there's also is an element of like personal choices that were made that probably should have went the other way, but are also because of that, what too much Joe Biden does to somebody, what being around Biden staffers for 4 years does to somebody, and how they strategize and how they think about politics.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the problems here stem from the Democrats being Democrats and Joe Biden.
I do want to also throw out there in terms of our criticism of Democrats, just if there's anybody new here, we do think Democrats are better than Republicans.
Oh, 100%.
This is unquestionable.
We went from 2 years ago getting in trouble for our takes that you should vote for Democrats in the primaries because they are better at Republicans to now getting in trouble for criticizing Democrats 3 years out from a general election.
Like the primary process, she's a private citizen right now.
She's a private citizen, and she's not saying she's running. She told Rachel Maddow she's not thinking about it right now. Of course, she's probably going to run.
Yeah. Well, and half of the book is campaigning for 2028.
Oh, and we'll get into that.
But I want to let you know, like, we criticize Democrats insofar as they enable the agenda of Republicans.
Yes.
Because the agenda of Republicans is, as we can all agree, bad.
Yeah.
Therefore, Democrats should be criticized for enabling that. Getting to the book itself, though, I wanted to see in this book, one, how Harris appraised her own loss, the sort of level of introspection she would take. I wanted to see just how unhinged the Biden administration was, which it turns out was very unhinged towards her. And then lastly, as I said, what does it portend for the future? And with those disclaimers out of the way, I think we are ready to get into the actual text here.
Yeah, because that's really something, especially going into this book, especially if you've been listening to us during the lead up for this book, is it went from thinking that this was just going to be honestly what it ended up being, this like fluff piece, this thing, blah, 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 whatever. She's just talking about the things, Democrat lose elections and write book, to the excerpts coming out and thinking that what information was revealed in the excerpts was going to mean that the book was a bit more introspective than it actually was, to actually reading the book and being profoundly disappointed. Because there was a little bit of mismatch between expectations and reality because of the excerpts that came out that is so frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
So frustrating. She put out the things about the VP process, about Joe Biden and whatnot, and those ended up being, like, I guess, the most consequentially introspective parts of the book. Those were the only parts of the book that were candid, like this book was marketed as. This overall was not like a candid piece into like what her experience was in those 107 days, aside from a couple key conversations that we wouldn't know about and interpersonal dynamics. This was mostly just fluff.
Yeah, and if you want us to boil it down real quick, it comes down to the decision for Biden not to drop out sooner was a bad one. And that plays into the broader thesis of the book, which is 107 days wasn't enough time, right? And we will criticize this conclusion over the course of our review here. But then also in the moments where she acknowledges stumbles that she made, it boils down to like, I just said the wrong mix of words here. And not I had a fundamental misunderstanding of the campaign and what people wanted. Again,
like based on the excerpts that came out, I really thought that there was going to be like actual genuine introspective in here. I did not think that this was going to be like a autopsy of the campaign and what went wrong, because like obviously she was never going to do that. That wasn't in the expectations. But I just thought that there was going to be more in here where she's like, this happened, this was a mistake, or we did this and this was wrong, and if I had that opportunity, I wouldn't do it again. But at every turn, it turned into, we didn't have enough time.
Well, except when she finds avenues to have been more conservative.
Because
there's a couple of those, like the transport issue gets a fucking shout out in here, and I'm gonna tear into it later because it's like, we'll get into it in a little bit. I don't want to spoil it all right now, but it's just like every turn, like you said, it seems like she has a bad appraisal of the situation, except for how bad Joe Biden was. But then the conclusion is like, I was loyal to him. And it's like, why?
It's like, I feel like overall throughout this book, it's that like, I don't get a clear sense of whether there is disdain or reverence for Biden, and I don't think the book knows which one it is. Because there are moments where on the same page she will praise the guy and then say, but he was like mean to me. And he was genuinely mean to her.
And it's not one of those things where it's like artistically complicated.
Exactly. It's not a juxtaposition.
Yeah. It's not like one of those complicated things that you'd find in a novel where like two things are true at once.
Yeah.
It's just like, you're a real person, you're a politician, make your mind up.
It's like we have an unreliable narrator, but it's like nonfiction though.
Yeah, in a fiction book, I want a reliable narrator. It's like actually important. Anyways, I do think we should get into the meat of the book here. And what I want to start off with is Brandon.
Joe Brandon, man. In
this book, Joe Biden and his team come across as absolute fucking problems.
Oh my God. They hated the Biden staffers were mean to her.
Yeah.
Biden staffers did not fuck with her. Biden did ignore her.
Yeah. And this trend takes off right at the beginning of the book, before the debate happens where Joe Biden drops out, well before they're even considering Biden dropping out from the race. On page 6, it says, within the campaign, there had been a whole debate about whether he should debate. Should is italics here, emphasized. Joe had seemed reluctant from the start. Jill seemed to think he shouldn't either. Trump's refusal to debate during his party's primary had cleared a plausible path for avoiding it. Nancy Pelosi, for one, argued that Biden didn't need to lower the dignity of the presidency by appearing on stage with a convicted felon who tried to subvert the last election. They were considering not even putting him on the stage. And like, I get it. Debating and campaigning isn't like immediately related to the job of president. Yeah. But if you can't do it, then people are going to worry that you can't be president, because it does take stamina to be the president.
Exactly. And there are moments in here where she's praising Biden and she's talking about how great he is at governing and all of these things. And then she concedes that but he couldn't communicate because running for the president is hard.
Yeah.
Your ability to communicate is directly tied to your ability to govern, at least in the public eye. Your ability to govern is tied to your ability to win an election so you can govern. Mm-hmm. And your ability to win an election is your ability to message. Yeah. And if you can't do one of those things, you should be disqualified from running for office.
Yeah, and more to the point of the Biden administration being fucking evil, there's this part on page 26 and 27 where Harris is describing a conversation that Doug Emhoff, her husband, had with Jill Biden. Yeah. Jill Biden, low-key a villain of this story. Like, every time she's mentioned, she's being mean.
The subtext here is that Jill Biden was a problem and that she was absolutely enabling, especially Joe Biden and everything.
Especially because later on she says Tim Walz's wife is like fantastic.
Yep.
There's so much shade at Jill.
There was in the beginning, when she's talking about the days before Biden dropped out and the anxiety around that, she said everyone on her staff was repeating this mantra: "It's Joe and Jill's decision. It's Joe and Jill's decision." Yeah. Really?
Yeah. So what Jill said to Doug apparently was, quote, "Be careful." This is after Joe Biden dropped out. Yep. "Be careful what you wish for." Her tone was desolate. "You're about to see how horrible the world is."
That's a crazy thing. This is at the 4th of July barbecue too.
Yeah, just painting the Biden and his team and his even his family to be just total fucking menaces. And I thought that was crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah. That's absolutely crazy. While we're on, you said page 26, right?
Yeah.
There's an interesting quote on page 26 that I wanted to read here. I don't think related to Joe, more so what I think is emblematic of problems with her campaign. And it starts with she's talking about a speech that she had to give. "But this speech was different. I knew what I needed to say about Trump's character, his record, and his horrible agenda. For the first 2 weeks of this campaign, I would have nothing but the benefit of my own instincts. Polling hadn't been done, messages hadn't been tested, but I didn't need polling that day to know what I wanted to say and exactly how I wanted to say it." So this is in the first 2 weeks of her campaign when things are just getting off the ground. She's got to give a speech. It is not a flex to go out there and deliver your message not poll tested. Yeah. And I don't know why you think that is.
Yeah, especially because it seems like when you got the poll testing, it was bad.
Yeah.
Whatever you gleaned from that data was not good whatsoever. Yeah, the book is kind of weird because it tells the story almost non-linearly.
Yeah.
Which is not what you'd expect from a book titled 107 Days and the chapters count backwards.
The 107 days thing is a gimmick. The chapters being July 22nd, 106 days to the election is a gimmick. There would be chapters that start off, obviously, with the count till the election, and then 2 sentences in will be yeah, but I remember this thing 3 months ago where this happened. And the whole chapter is really just about that. It's just a gimmick, but that's just whatever. You know what I'm saying?
And I want to keep on this beat of hating on Joe Biden because, again, I do genuinely think that, Joe Biden caused a lot of the problems for the Harris campaign. Mm-hmm. And that's not to absolve her of responsibility, right? She made a lot of decisions that I think ended up being the wrong choice. But Joe Biden did not help her in any way and apparently continued to hamstring her throughout the entire race. Again, from beginning to end. There's this quote on page 40. It says, quote, "The last thing our ailing campaign needed," which was before but Joe Biden dropped out, of course. "The last thing our ailing campaign needed was rumors of a rift between the president and me. What I didn't know then was that some of his senior staff didn't share that concern. In their own calls trying to quell the rebellion, they'd been talking me down, saying, quote, if Joe goes, you'll get her, strongly implying that I wasn't up to it.
That's crazy. And that's why I say, like, the staffers, like Joe staffers just fucking hated her.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the fuck they were putting in the water at the White House, but these staffers were on some different timing. This next piece of information is, of course, something we already knew, but this comes from page 29. Quote, she's talking about, like, Joe staffers and, like, her concern with taking over the campaign and the people that were, like, left there. She says, I'd become concerned that data was being filtered to manage Joe's mood and lift his spirits. I need straight talk. We have many pollsters. Are they all in agreement on what's being presented at these meetings? Joe Biden's team here, straight from the vice president's mouth, was filtering data to she's suspecting that Joe Biden's team was filtering data in order to make this guy's mood better and not actually tell him what was going on in the campaign, which was a suspicion that we had suspected for a while now, especially after he dropped out. And here all but confirmed.
Yeah. And there's a bit that I want to get to in a moment, just like an explanation of Biden's age issues from the perspective of Harris.
Yes.
But again, just sticking on how insane this staff was, Kamala Harris is describing various accusations that were launched at her, just lies from Fox News and different conservative media, right, on page 48. And she was explaining her frustration with the staff, like, not her staff, but with Biden's staff, essentially doing nothing to push back on these negative accusations towards his vice president. And she says, quote, and when the stories were unfair or inaccurate, the president's inner circle seemed fine with it. Indeed, it seemed as if they decided I should be knocked down a little bit more.
Crazy,
that's fucking psychotic, dog.
It is actually crazy. And there's a critique that she kind of gets into here where it's like Biden did not really set her up to be able to, like, properly take over. And that's probably the one point in this whole thing where I do genuinely, like, feel for her.
Oh, yeah.
Where things were totally out of her control, because how she was treated by Biden and his staff is fucking insane. And there are even more instances too, but it's just like, wow.
Yeah. And then she went on to note after that, she talked about how she was given the job of quote unquote border czar. And that was one of the things that she was sort of frustrated with. It was like, border czar, not a real job. Wasn't her title either. It's the thing that Fox News gave her. And again, the Biden administration did not help her push back on that.
They just ran with it.
Because naturally, like, the vice president doesn't have the same podium as the president, right? So, like, it's the president's job and the president's team's job to push back on this. And something I didn't know is she gets into the data here explaining, like, the progress that had actually been made. And she went to the Biden White House or Biden's team and said, let's tell this story, right? People are mad about the border. Let's explain to them, I guess you would say, like, the incremental change we've been able to achieve. And they said, quote, not yet. We need more data. The story remained untold. Essentially, they just did, like, they didn't spin the narrative. And this was true of Biden. And we know it's true of Biden that he wasn't able to spin a message because he was so fucking old. He just couldn't communicate. But his entire team just seemed unwilling to participate in, like, any political messaging.
Exactly.
And that hamstringed her from the beginning.
And dude was entirely not able to communicate. And there's still, like, this tension here when how she's talking about Joe Biden, where she can't just say plainly that dude wasn't good at his job.
Yeah.
Page 41, I found particularly egregious when she's talking about, quote, at the White House, talking about, like, Joe Biden, many people want to spin up a narrative of some big conspiracy at the White House to hide Joe Biden's infirmity.
Yeah.
Here is the truth as I lived it. Joe Biden was a smart guy with long experience and deep conviction, able to discharge the duties of the president.
Come on.
On his worst day, he was more deeply knowledgeable, more capable of exercising judgment, and far more compassionate than Donald Trump on his best. That is not a high bar to pass, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't believe it was incapacity. If I believed that, I would have said so. As loyal as I am to President Biden, I am more loyal to my country, Corny. What I do know is that he needed rest, and you're not going to get it during a presidential campaign. They don't call it running for office for nothing. Any campaign is a full sprint. A presidential race is splintering through a marathon. Like a marathon, it is a test of endurance. Unlike a marathon, tomatoes are being thrown at you every step of the way.
Yeah.
Just giving excuses for, like, Joe Biden's old age and not being able to communicate. Just say he couldn't fucking do it, man. Like, the tension between the loyalty to Biden and, like, I guess him elevating you to the vice president and the disdain for how he treated you is palpable.
Oh, yeah. You didn't even get to my favorite part of this passage, which is a paragraph towards the bottom of page 41.
Oh, yeah.
She laments about the distinction I brought up before of being able to govern versus being able to campaign, right? Different things that you need to be able to do.
Yeah.
But she says, quote, as for campaigning, I did have concerns. His voice was no longer strong. His verbal stumbles more frequent. Apart from the superhuman stamina required, communicating is the main game. Before he stepped aside from the top of the ticket, I had planned to do many of the big public rallies and a lot of the crazy travel while his team fashioned a White House-based campaign for him.
Trump was right. Bro was campaigning from the basement.
Bro
was hiding in the basement.
What the fuck do you mean they were planning for a White House-based campaign?
You're telling me the president of the United States can't go around the country?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Like
that never should have been acceptable, dude.
This is like Jake Tapper wrote an entire fucking book about how old Biden was. This is the most damning thing I have heard about the fact that Biden shouldn't have ran again, is that his team was prepping a White House-based campaign for him. That is unacceptable. If you are planning to not even run for president, because like literally running for president is going around, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's what running is. If you can't even run for president, like literally go and visit with voters, you can't do it,
You can't do it and you can't govern.
And you can't win.
And it's like, this is what I say about how she's talking about like, oh, but he was able to govern, but he wasn't able to communicate. This is her example of him being able to govern. From the same fucking page, dude, page 41, there is a distinction between his ability to campaign and his ability to govern. I was right beside him as he navigated successfully through intensely dangerous world events. Putin's threat to use tactical nuclear weapons on the Ukrainian battlefront, the missile exchange between Iran and Israel that might have escalated into regional war if we hadn't rallied the diverse coalition that protected Israel during those attacks. His judgment, his experience, and the relationships he had developed were expertly deployed.
Yeah.
We're doing Biden's got a PhD in foreign policy. He's just that good.
Hang on. There's another page on which she does basically that same thing. Yeah, it's page 98. I think she was talking about the strike on Tehran back in like April of 2024, yes. I think. And she says, differences of opinion existed even within our national security team. As with every national security issue, the president would hear from the generals. He would challenge the heads of intelligence community. He would seek a global view, teasing out how any given action we take in one region would be perceived by our allies or adversaries elsewhere. His years of experience in foreign policy clearly showed in those discussions. He was always focused, always commander-in-chief in that room. No, he wasn't.
No, he was not.
Straight up, no, he wasn't.
He just let Netanyahu do whatever he wanted. Was Joe Biden focused and commander-in-chief when he got on the stage and said, oh, we're putting a red line at the invading of Rafah?
Yeah.
And then just let it happen?
It's just on its face absurd. Like, if it was true that she was, like, the closest person to him, or one of the closest, being the vice president, this is not believable to anybody.
Yeah.
Like, we saw what we saw on that debate stage, and with all the exposés that have happened, we know how bad Joe Biden was. He was not acting. He did not have a PhD in this shit.
No, he was
just
letting
absurd.
people like run the shit for him. He was doing things. Maybe he was in these rooms, but I cannot believe that he was some dude that was phenomenal at governing.
No.
By fucking having great ideas and using his connections. Dude could barely get a sentence out.
Yeah.
And I know these speeches were late at night, but it's a problem when the president has to be told no speeches past 9 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. I want to talk about some other moments during the campaign itself. All of that was before.
This is about Biden, right?
Yeah, this is about Biden on page 156. This is all.
I got that open right now too.
Everything we had just talked about was beforehand.
Uh-huh.
Right. All of this is either leading up to the debate that sucked. They are planning a White House-based campaign for him after the debate when he completely fumbled and it became her turn. Which, by the way, the story she tells right at the beginning of the book, how like they didn't even prepare her like at all. It just sort of happened one day. She was as surprised as we were. Wicked.
Absolutely.
But now this is during her campaign. This is just before she got on stage to debate with Donald Trump. She gets a call from Joe Biden, and here's what she writes about that. It says, quote, this is Biden that starts off talking. My brother called. He's been talking to a group of real power brokers in Philly. He rattled off several names. Do you know them? No, I replied, thinking he was maybe going to offer to introduce me to them or call them on my behalf. But I was confused as to why he was raising this now on this day. This was like minutes before she walked on stage for the debate, right? Then he got to his point. His brother had told him that those guys were not going to support me because I'd been saying bad things about him. He wasn't inclined to believe it, he claimed, but he thought I should know in case my team had been encouraging me to put daylight between the two of us. This is Joe Biden essentially threatening her to not throw him under the bus.
In a swing state. Pennsylvania, I believe the most important swing state, because Pennsylvania had the most electoral votes, didn't it?
Yeah,
most important swing state. He said, yeah, you're fucked, buddy, if you're mean to me.
Yeah.
You better not distance yourself from me.
And he said this right before she needs to like get in the zone to do a presidential debate. The only one.
And we had just went through 5 chapters of debate prep where she's like talking through like all the things she had to go through, how horrible the experience was, how rigorous the experience of doing debate prep is, all for Joe Biden in the 11th hour to just kill her confidence.
Yeah, and then there's also the reference to his supporters are garbage comments after the Tony Hinchcliffe bullshit. And then she also talks about Biden putting on the MAGA hat as like late in the game mistakes that Joe Biden made that hurt her campaign.
Putting on the MAGA hat is crazy.
That thing was fun. That was funny.
The MAGA hat was funny, but like that is crazy. The Tony Hinchcliffe stuff I thought was interesting because I honestly like, and I think this is part of a problem with her campaign, and I'm sure we'll get into just talking about her and how things were ran with this after we get through Biden, but it's just like, when Joe Biden said no, Trump supporters are garbage after that, she's talking about it in a way where it's like she thinks she's really going to lose votes over that. And I can understand maybe you performatively wanting to say that, but to seriously think that people weren't going to vote for Joe Biden and were instead going to vote for Trump because Joe Biden one time said Trump supporters were garbage after Trump had a guy call Puerto Rico garbage was a problem is patently insane.
Well, and she directly compares it to the deplorables comment that Hillary Clinton made when she said that Trump supporters are the deplorables or fucking whatever.
Like, why are we policing our language so much to combat a guy who doesn't at all whatsoever?
No, yeah, it's a misunderstanding of like the mistakes that I made or that were made on my behalf, I suppose, in the case of Joe Biden. In terms of messaging, all it was about was just like a few bad words that we shouldn't have said.
Exactly.
And not about the fundamental issue, which is that people can't fucking afford eggs.
But it's just like, it's a broader problem with Democrats to think that like if they slip up like that, they're going to actually like lose votes on the thing. Yeah. Nobody's going to vote for Trump because Joe Biden said that Trump supporters were garbage. Trump says way worse things about literally everybody else every single fucking day, and it's not a problem.
Yeah.
That's just not the electorate we have.
And again, like this was, I think, like 5 days before the election. Yeah. I think is what she had it noted down or dated in her book. There are much broader material influences that push people to the polls, again, namely the economy. That, comments like this that late in the game, they don't matter. Maybe in a previous era they did, although I wouldn't really think so. But like, that's just not shit that matters. But I can understand being mad at Biden for it because it doesn't help.
Being mad at Biden for it is valid.
Yes. Yes.
The general analysis that like it's actually a problem, though, I think isn't.
But I just want to conclude talking about Biden here. Like, Biden genuinely fucked this up for her in a lot of ways. And I want to conclude with a quote from Doug Emhoff, again, her husband. He said, quote, "They hide you away for 4 years, give you impossible shit jobs, don't correct the record when those tasks are mischaracterized, never fight back when you're attacked, never appraise your accomplishments, and now finally, they want you out there on the balcony standing right beside him. Now finally, they know you are an asset and they need you to reassure the American people, and still they ask if we're loyal." This was right after the terrible debate performance. Like, that sums it up, right?
Yeah.
Like, he fucked her over in every single way and still expected loyalty. And that gets to the question of why she remained loyal in the face of all of this. Biden treated her like shit for years.
So did his staff.
So did his staff for absolute years. And yet on the campaign trail, she remained loyal to him. And that's like one of the fundamental questions I have that is not answered at all in this book is like, why stay so close to Joe Biden?
Exactly. And like those moments are the moments, pretty much the only moments where she is actually like telling us something that Joe Biden did to harm her and like reflecting on it in any sort of negative way.
Yeah.
Everything else is just praise for the guy. I have this quote from the end of the book. This is the election day chapter on page 280. She said, at 9:15 p.m., I left the family still enjoying a rowdy dinner and went upstairs. I put on sweats to do my hair and makeup. The aubergine suit I planned to wear to Howard was pressed and ready on a hanger. On my dresser was a handwritten note from Joe that he'd sent over the day before. The note said, "I could not have asked for a better partner and friend," he wrote, "and can hardly wait to call you Madam President." I smiled gratefully as I reread it.
Yeah.
Like, that guy is part of the reason why you lost that night. That guy is a huge part of the reason why we're in the position that we are right now. And when we're in a moment like we are now, later in the book, she says that she didn't start writing this till after Election Day. I don't know if I believe that, but that's besides the point. I don't believe that. But that's besides the point. Like, if you are sitting down to write this after Election Day and like writing this down, the fact that she feels loyal to Biden wasn't just an electoral concern. It was a problem with her and how she views herself and her position within the party.
Yeah.
Because now more than ever, it would be so easy to distance yourself from Joe Biden. Not even going out there and saying, Joe Biden sucked, fuck Joe, he was so mean to me, but just by not praising him. You can distance yourself just by not constantly telling people that the guy was super great.
Yeah, and especially because people know, again, on its face, that that's absurd.
Yeah.
And it burns your credibility to get out here and go to bat for the president. And in fact, she does address, like, directly why didn't she separate from Joe Biden. But before I read that quote off, it's like, yeah, it's a deeper, like, personal failing. And I think it just comes from sort of osmosis through being a part of the Democratic establishment. We know that so much of the Democratic Party is based upon seniority, right? It's the reason the AOC didn't get the job that Jerry Connolly got. Rest in peace, King. It's the reason that Joe Biden was chosen like as the candidate back in the primary in 2020. We know that the Democrats care like deeply about seniority and about loyalty to the party above what comes next for like the American people, right?
Yes.
And this just isn't true with the Republicans. They kicked Kevin McCarthy out, a guy who like for all intents and purposes deserved the job as speaker because he stood in the way of Trump's agenda. And a lot of the Republican Party resisted that, but still, like, look who got their way in that process, right? Donald Trump obviously did not, like, wait his turn. He didn't earn it or anything like that. And maybe Republicans used to operate differently, but they certainly don't operate the same way in terms of seniority that the Democrats do right now. And now I want to read, like, why she, like, her view on not separating herself from Joe Biden. And this came right after, this reflection comes after in the book. She's talking about her appearance on The View, where she's asked, what would you do differently? And she said, nothing comes to mind.
The chapter about The View.
Yeah.
Particularly egregious.
Yeah.
28 days to the election, October 8th. I can't even describe how angry I was reading this thing, dude. This shit sucks. And I don't believe you're going to start it off here, but it is at the beginning. And I do want to get this quote off before we actually get in there. She's just talking about what The View is and people on The View. And she says, Anna Navarro, a Republican, I debated on she's talking about like all the different people. Whoopi Goldberg and I bonded over our shared lives in the Bay Area. Sonny Houston, I knew as a lawyer, and she had been a prosecutor like me. Anna Navarro, a Republican, I debated on immigration during the Bush years, but we are aligned on many other issues.
Boo.
Why are we highlighting that? Why are we highlighting that you align with a Republican on like so many other issues?
Well, it's foreshadowing for what she says on The View.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely it is, but I don't think she thinks it is.
No.
Like, I think she thinks that's just like a genuinely good thing to like put out there. I think she thinks that's what the American people want in here.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother conversation that we'll save for a bit later on.
Yeah, so she's asked the question that we talked about here on the show back when she said it. She's essentially asked, if you were president, would you have done anything different from Biden in the last 4 years? And then she says, quote, there's not a thing that comes to mind. And then she explains that there was like a commercial break and she was off sort of like talking to different people, talking to her staff. And they came up and talked to her and said that the answer that you should have given was that you want a Republican in your cabinet. That's what you would have done differently. Not even going to talk about it just yet. Like that shit sucks too, by the way.
Yeah, that shit sucks horribly.
Sucks bigly. But then she gets to this question of, she says, why didn't I separate myself from Joe Biden? Then she says, over the course of 107 days, I became increasingly aware that people wanted to know there was separation and that it was a big issue for them. I just didn't realize how big. The way I'd heard Sonny's question was that it was asking me to be critical of Joe Biden. I've never believed you need to elevate yourself by pushing somebody else down. What are we talking about, dog?
That's what I'm saying,
He's
man.
an unpopular incumbent president who is going to get dog walked by Donald Trump had you not come into the election. What you needed to do was separate from him.
And you don't need to push Joe Biden down by doing that. That is a flaw on your thinking when you think that saying that is when you think that like even like saying something that maybe you failed at during the administration is pushing Joe Biden down. Every politician fails at every step of their fucking career. It's a normal thing. To go out there and say we failed to get $15 minimum wage, that's something that I'm going to change, is not putting Biden down. And if it is putting Biden down, it's only putting him down in the sense that the buck stops at the presidency.
Yeah.
And that's just something that you take on when you become the president of the United States. That's something you have to accept.
Yeah, and to that idea of it being like her personal analysis, later on that page it says, quote, even after the lack of support from the White House, the debate night phone call, and the MAGA hat debacle, I felt I owed him my loyalty. And that's the fundamental issue here. And we hated on the Harris campaign right after the election, and we blamed the Democratic strategists for forcing her to stay too close to Joe Biden in terms of how she ran her campaign and the issues that she campaigned on. But it turns out it was Kamala Harris herself who wanted to remain loyal to Biden, and it was people like David Plouffe who said people hate Joe Biden, we need to separate from Joe Biden.
Which is crazy that you're giving David Plouffe that.
I sincerely apologize to David Plouffe.
Really?
I didn't know your game. I thought the whole time it was the Democratic consultant, still a fake job, by the way. I thought it was the strategist telling her you can't separate from Biden, it'll look too bad. But it was Kamala Harris herself who remained loyal to Biden of her own accord, against the advice of her constituents.
This book is low-key pro-consultant. It's low-key job-saving, dude. And even like on this whole thing, like about her and her loyalty to Joe Biden, like beyond that, there's this quote on page 214. Had I in that interview come up with one area of policy difference, it would have been limited. It would have limited the definition of the difference between us to that one thing, rather than my unique perspective on a variety of issues. And it wouldn't have ended there. It would have opened the door to a discussion that is backward-looking rather than forward-looking. There would be a slew of never-ending follow-up questions. Well, apart from that one, how would you have made X or Y decision differently from Biden? These are important things to be asking someone who wants to be the president of the United States. I would, in fact, love to know how they would want to do something differently than the guy who came before them and didn't do a good job.
I literally wrote in the margins, that's the point.
Yeah.
Like knowing precisely what you would have done differently is the point at a time when the incumbent is unpopular.
Yeah.
When
people
the
want change.
Exactly. People want change. People want something different. Trump was offering change in a way in which he was lying most of the time. But he was offered, he was the change candidate, indisputably. And so people wanted to know, how would you be different from Joe Biden? And when you say the only difference is that you would have had, let's be honest, Liz Cheney in your cabinet, that's uninspiring. Nobody gives a fuck. They want to know how you're going to make their lives better. And if you say you wouldn't have deviated from Joe Biden at all, that's going to be a loser.
And it's like the differences that she chooses to highlight a page before on page 213 after the quote you read are differences that frankly do not matter substantively to getting the electorate to want to vote for you. She says, quote, to me, the difference was evident. Different backgrounds, different generation, different career, obviously a different person.
That's not how it works.
People want different policy.
Yeah.
That's what it is, dude. I don't understand how we, at every fucking turn, like loyalty to Joe Biden has just poisoned the thought, the decision-making process, on this campaign.
And this gets to the conversation we were having earlier today, where it's like, when you're a presidential candidate, you're not a person anymore. Like people aren't voting for a person. They are voting for a vehicle to get things done that they want done. You're an agent of history at that point. People want to know your policies, but because it informs what you're going to do for them. And if the only difference is like, well, I'm a different person, it's just not enough.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't mean anything.
Of course you're a different
people.
person.
Yeah, obviously.
Obviously you're a different person. Obviously you're not an old man.
Yeah.
Like, straight up, that's what it is. And, we've given a little bit too much prop to consultants and I guess people who work on it, like a campaign, people who do staff. And I got to highlight how, like, the whole Republican in a cabinet thing was, yes, an idea that she had, but it's an idea she had with her staff. And when she initially avoided it, when initially she was asked that question about what she would do differently from Joe Biden, she said, not a damn thing, or whatever she said.
Yeah.
She writes in this book, Paul, one of her staffers, quote, Paul passed me a note from our team, this is during the commercial break, I believe, telling me to return to that question and mention that a big difference would be that I would put a Republican in my cabinet. I would say that, not a damn thing is very bad. And just for me personally, though, going back to it and saying, no, let me correct my statement, I would have a Republican in my cabinet is damning. Well, is damning for how you think about this campaign.
It's like, who do I vote for if I don't want Republicans making policy?
Yeah.
Do I have no options? It's either an actual like demon in Donald Trump, right? The enemy, Donald Trump, the Republicans, somebody who's going to fully staff their cabinet with Republicans, or a Democrat who's going to capitulate to Republicans. Where's the Democrat that's not going to capitulate to Republicans?
Like, we talk about the uniparty. We talk about how, like, in a lot of ways, like, Democrats and Republicans may be the same. You're trying to make them literally the same.
Yeah.
People don't want that. People want distinction. People want Democrats to be distinct from Republicans, and they wanted you to be distinct from Joe Biden. But those are just two things I guess we couldn't get.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
And it's like, if you poll people on the idea of bipartisanship, they'll say they like it, right?
Yep.
Because it just like, it has an air of compromise about it. People will say, by nature, by default, that compromise is good. But people want bipartisanship because it will presumably give them something. And in this era, putting a Republican in your cabinet will do nothing except make your policies less good than they could be.
Yeah.
And admitting that on TV, and it's the fact, like you said, like that's the only thing that would be different. First, it's nothing, and then we'd be worse. Like, why is that the answer? And in this book, again, I find no explanation for why she didn't deviate from Biden, other than I just wanted to be loyal to him. And if that's the only answer, then I'm sorry, like that's just your fault.
And it's also to explain that away by saying I wanted the campaign to be future looking rather than backward looking. People who are going to the polls are looking back at a time under Trump 1, even though it wasn't because of Trump, where things were more affordable and generally better for them.
Yeah.
Like, people are always looking back and comparing things. You need to be doing that too. I respect the idea that we need to be future looking, but I can't respect it in absence of doing reflection.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah, and I want to keep touching on these interview moments that she had, because that's the View, and that informs us how she sort of felt about separating herself from Joe Biden. But she also talks at length about her other big interviews that she did. The first one that gets a mention in this book is the one with Dana Bash, and this is the first interview that she did after the convention with Tim Walz at her side, as is the tradition with Republican and Democratic candidates, right? You finish the convention, your first interview with your running mate is a big deal. And she talks about it here, describes it at some pretty great length, and she knows that it was like a big deal, and she sort of laments how long it took her to get to it, saying that like I wasn't prepared, and if I wasn't prepared, it was going to go poorly. And then she talks a lot about like the setup was bad, and having Tim Walz next to me like was a bad look, and that's why the interview went poorly. A lot of it is just sort of like blaming the set, or even blaming her own staff for what like the problems within like late in the Dana Bash interview. And I just found that weird.
I thought it was weird too. I don't think anybody reading this book or anybody who watched that CNN interview cared that you were missing a key light, or cared that the key light was off, or cared that maybe that there wasn't enough background separation between the subject and the scene. Or cared that it was in a dingy like Korean place, like some diner somewhere. Like it was in some dingy restaurant, as you described it. Like that's not the substance of what anything cares about. People want to see you reflect on the answers that you gave. Like there is a problem with Democrats in general, and this is not just Kamala Harris, where they do care way too much about these weird like aesthetic grievances. And I'm a guy that likes production design. I think about production design. I work on some production design. Like I think about these things too, but the general public doesn't really give a shit about a lot of that. A lot of that is in the background, and it just needs to be to a level that was good enough, and that was, because the moment that was your first interview as the nominee for the president was important. Yeah.
And she does get to an interesting bit here where she's essentially asked the question that was around the campaign the entire time: why haven't you done it yet, right? You say you want to do all these policies that maybe Biden hasn't implemented yet. Why haven't you done it yet? And she describes her answer, then eventually goes on to say, quote, I should have simply said I haven't done those things because I am not president yet. And this is what we said, right? And I totally agree with this. But now reflecting on how she felt she needed to be loyal to Biden, she couldn't have ever said I'm not president yet, because that would imply that Biden wasn't being a good enough president to implement these things. It would have implied that there was a distinction between the two, and clearly the only distinction was I would have put a Republican as fucking transportation secretary or something.
I'd let Liz Cheney into more government.
I would have made Liz Cheney Secretary of State.
It's fucking stupid,
like,
man.
It's
fucking
just
stupid.
Like, this should have been the response from the beginning. But the thing is also, like, that's not a hard response to come to.
No.
It's kind of the obvious response.
Nobody gives a shit about the VP, man. VP been a fake job.
Yeah.
VP been a fake job. When she was talking about VP selection in this book, she gets to it's a fake job without like getting there.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because there's this thing where she talks about how Joe Biden didn't give her like enough to do, didn't give her enough power within his White House. But then when she's talking about VP selection, she's like, yeah, I couldn't go with Josh Shapiro because he wanted too much power.
Yeah.
She's like, I didn't want to come off across as too ambitious. So Josh Shapiro, fuck you. You're acting way too ambitious. And it is crazy to talk about what art you would want in your office on your way to the selection interview.
That is insane. He was talking to the driver about like, oh, here's the art that I would get from a Pennsylvania artist and put it up in the Naval
loan
Observatory.
From the Smithsonian.
Yeah, that's insane.
That is insane. That's crazy. That was pretty much like the only thing out of VP selection that I thought was interesting, though, other than like insider info on like physically how it's done.
Yeah. She also talks about, speaking of interviews, she speaks about the Anderson Cooper interview on CNN. This is page 247. And again, the takeaway here is that like aesthetically I made some mistakes. Not that that, like, again, I had a fundamental misunderstanding of what happened, because the thing that she zeroes in on is the question about, is Trump a fascist? Do you think that he's a fascist? And as you all recall, she said at the CNN town hall, yes, I think he's a fascist, and people in his administration also think he's a fascist. But then she goes on to say that, like, the better response would have been just focusing on people that Trump previously hired, saying that he was a fascist, so that people would get the idea that, like, even the people around Donald Trump don't trust him. And that's a fair hit to do. Yeah. But again, it's like a surface level critique saying, oh, I just didn't say the right string of words, rather than like, there's a fundamental missing piece here and I'm not connecting with voters.
And it's like, I think a lot of liberals, a lot of establishment Democrats think they can do all these focus groups, talk to all these consultants, and through that, they can find the perfect sentence that they can craft that will appeal to literally anybody on the planet. And that's just not realistic. That's not something that could ever possibly happen.
Yeah, it's this whole idea that a lot of Democrats, including people like Ken Martin, have right now, where they think the party is suffering just a branding issue. It's not just a branding issue. It's not just about the words you choose or you're doing too many focus groups, although that is certainly part of the problem. It's the fact that you don't have policies that inspire people. You don't have bold policies that make it seem like you will actually fight for the people that you aim to represent. And the policies inform how people view the brand itself.
Yeah.
And if in lieu of those policies, people will see you as feckless bicoastal elites. And I don't want the party to be that. I want the party to be an organization that fights for things like universal health care. But to be willing to do that would mean that you'd have to be bold enough to push back on the donor class that you rely on. That is the issue with the Democratic Party right now. And it seems she and many, many, many others are unwilling to interrogate that fact.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the fundamental issue with her analysis of maybe missteps she had in these interviews that she did.
It's fucked up, man. And I think another great interview that she did, or at least another great section of this book that she talks about an interview, is on page, 206, where she's talking about Charlemagne the God and her appearance on there.
I forgot about that
one.
And
man, it's just like everything that happens here is just so genuinely revealing. Sorry, 206 is more so about campaigning with Liz Cheney, but while we're on the topic, I got a whole note thing. I looked at the wrong thing.
Cheney mentioned on my book.
Yeah, the talk with Liz Cheney. And fuck it, you know what? Why don't we just talk about that? What pissed me off the most about the Liz Cheney chapters, about the Liz Cheney discussion, is that she's justifying her decision to campaign with Liz Cheney by saying, I didn't do it as much as the media said I did.
Yeah, I had that highlighted in here too. She says, the amount of that time, however, was exaggerated by the media's interest in our unlikely pairing. We campaigned together for only 1.5 days. And that might be true, but the fundamental issue is that your campaign was inclined to choose someone like Liz Cheney to campaign with.
Yes.
That's the issue.
And it's like she goes, I was glad to give some time to campaigning with Liz Cheney in the hope that we could reach those Republicans who believe, as we do, that fundamental principles of our democracy should never be partisan issues. Well, they are.
They think you stole the election.
In fact, like, it is a partisan issue right now, and those Republicans that believe that can either suck it up and do the right thing and vote Democrat, or they can continue to be wrong about things.
It's like the Republican Party has maintained like what, a 90%, 80% approval of Donald Trump throughout all of his time in politics these last 10 years. Like, you're not winning those people over. It's just not happening. The sect of Republicans that Liz Cheney represents is such a small group of people. The Republican Party is the Trump Party at this point. And the inclination to campaign with Liz Cheney, one, is just a misstep because you're not going to get those voters. It just doesn't represent anything real. And two, it reveals a deeper problem that you guys were even predisposed to make this decision in the first place.
And it's also like, just fucking why, man?
Yeah.
If you're talking about these Republicans that care deeply about democracy, I feel like you've just lost the plot. Not because there aren't Republicans that care about democracy, but because most people don't fucking care about democracy. Straight up, if you go find fucking 100 people on the street, I bet 99 of them will be like, I don't know, I don't really care. I just want eggs to be cheaper. Because that's what people care about. People do care about the kitchen table issues. People care about the economics of it all. People care about whether or not they can afford a home, afford to send their kids to college, afford to put fucking food on the table before they care about something that's like a more higher order level. Obviously, democracy is the bedrock of all that, and it's a very important thing, and we recognize that, but the median voter doesn't, and you need to like tailor your message in a way that they can understand that.
Yeah, no, democracy is vitally important. I would argue like the most important thing that we need to strive towards is like genuine democracy, a society where political power, all modes of power, are controlled by the people in common rather than any small select group of people. But like you said, the issue is that, one, when you ask somebody if they care about democracy, they'll just map whatever they want onto that issue. Like, it doesn't like mean anything consistent. And also, if the American people are a group of people that care deeply about democracy, then it sort of evades reason why they would vote for somebody twice that so obviously doesn't care about democracy. Because I think a lot of people are pretty, I think they're pretty aware of what Trump is, and it's not a deal breaker.
Yeah.
To a lot of them.
Or they just think, oh, he's not going to actually do that. He's just lying.
Yeah.
And that's like where we are. You got a message about things people like care about like, on a first order level. Nobody goes to the polls and says democracy is the number one reason that they went out there. It's just not what happens.
Well, liberals that are already voting for you.
Yeah, well, yes. Nobody that you don't already have on your campus doing that. Like the median voter, the swing voter that people love to talk about is not voting on democracy.
And that's actually reaffirmed in I don't remember where it is in this book, but she talks about how like the WAPO and the Los Angeles Times chickened out essentially and didn't want to endorse her, even though the editorial boards were ready to. And then she quotes somebody, I think maybe the satirist for the Washington Post or something.
It was the cartoonist, like the political comedy cartoonist or something like that.
that essentially said like, I like elections, that's why I'm voting for Kamala Harris. I want to keep having them. It's like, well, you already won this person.
Exactly. Like, that's already there. Like, you don't need to highlight them.
That's representative of like the people that are voting because they want future elections.
Exactly.
Like, you got that vote on lock, believe me.
Now go reach the dude that lives in the UP.
It's just that for a lot of people, they don't care much about democracy if it means eggs get cheaper. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, democracy is not the natural state of being. It is a social construction that we have to continue to maintain and protect. And if we can't do that, if our social systems break down and people's lives struggle, and people are struggling with their life so much, then yeah, they're going to go to the authoritarian who makes these wild promises. That's just how it works, man.
Exactly. You have to contend with that. Yes, it's not fair, but that's something you have to fight against. Like, and you have to do the hard, dirty work of messaging against that. Maybe sometimes not shutting down your crowd when they say lock them up.
Like, most of human existence is people living under authoritarian or dictatorial style rule. Liberal democracy is a new thing.
Yeah.
Like a brand, and again, we have to be willing to fight for it and address the underlying causes of rises of authoritarianism, which of course is like wealth inequality and shit like that. But no analysis of that in this book, of course.
And it's just like, she's never going to get on the fact that like the average voter does not care about the word democracy. The average voter fucking failed their civics class in high school.
It's what too much Brandon does to a motherfucker.
Except 100%. But back to interviews, like we were supposed to be. The Charlemagne section I found particularly interesting, and it's on page 189 that I want to read to you real quick. Quote, "When I appeared on his show, he lit right into me. You come off very scripted. You stick to your talking points. That would be called discipline," I retorted. When he pressed me, I explained that I needed to repeat my messages so that everyone could get to know what I stand for. It's not especially fun to give the same speech 3 times a day in 3 different cities 4 or 5 times a week, but it's necessary. Trump stood up there and spouted unfiltered nonsense about Hannibal Lecter and electric sharks. He called it the weave. I call it nonsense. The double standard on our style of presentation was galling. If I hesitated or backtracked mid-sentence to try to clarify or better express a thought, it was word salad. Meanwhile, Trump could describe Hurricane Florence as one of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
That bangs, dude.
That's fucking funny, though.
No, she's right.
I was going to say, there's like two things here. It's one, it is entirely true that there is a misogynistic and probably racist double standard when it comes to her off-script moments and Trump's off-script moments.
Yeah, from the standpoint of water.
That's so fucking funny.
Type shit I'd say in the group chat for no reason. That's really funny.
No, that is funny. And the fact that you chose to highlight that is funny, too.
Yeah.
Because that's what's making me laugh. And you're kind of distracting me from the point you're trying to make.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is unfair. But broadly, throughout this book, there are a lot of unfair things that you're just going to have to contend with.
Yeah.
As somebody who is running for the president of the United States. Like, we can't focus on that. The more substantive part of this is the fact that she's flexing the idea that she's like, yeah, just saying the same speech 3 times a day, every day for 5 days a week in 3 different cities. It's not fun work, but it's what you need to do. That's why people don't like Democrats.
Yeah.
You don't want to be too on message. You should not take the critique of, hey, I think you're a little stiff and I think you're a little too on message, and turn around and say, well, actually, like, I'm way more on message than you even ever thought that I was. Actually, I've never had an off-script moment.
And it's like, I get it. You want to develop a message and like hammer on specific things to sort of get them into the minds of voters, so you can like frame the narrative around yourself. And Trump certainly does this with shit like immigration, right? All he talks about is immigrants bad, trans people bad. The source of your misery is those 2 groups, right? Like, that's all Trump does. That's all the Republicans do at this point. But he does it in a way that's like authentic to him.
Yes.
And he comes across as like personable almost, and in a way that like I don't think many politicians can replicate. But in your own style, you gotta just like be a person.
Yeah, you come off very scripted is a different critique than you come off too on message.
Yeah.
Nobody wants you to be off message. You are supposed to be on message. That's how you go out there and you win elections and you get people to care about things.
And that's wholly a contemporary thing.
Yes.
Like this is a modern trend that you don't want to be too scripted or on message.
This is a social media thing.
And in like previous eras, like decades ago, even during like the 2008 election, like you wanted to be on message, you wanted to be scripted because like anything, if Obama had done anything that Trump has done, it would have immediately sunk his campaign.
Well, it's not even that you don't want to be not on message. You want to be on message. You want to always be on message, something Bernie does very well, but Bernie does it authentically. Bernie doesn't come off as scripted.
Yeah.
It's the fact that she comes off as scripted, and shit, maybe part of that was because she only had 107 days to run, but I think the underlying part of it is we're getting people in these positions that are just chasing voters, that are running away from them towards the Republican Party, and they're not going out and talking about a message that they actually believe in. Because when you actually believe in something, it's not that hard to remain on message and not contradict yourself and do things, and it's a lot easier to go off script and be able to talk about them.
Yeah, and the issue of needing to be scripted or needing like to be like overly prepared or say the same things over again, that brings me to the Dr. Mike interview that she gives some airtime to here on page 256 and 265 and 266. She sets this up by talking about how her team set up a Dr. Mike interview for her over Zoom where they were just going to talk about the potential RFK Jr. appointment, because at this point in the race, RFK was like firmly behind Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
And she talks about how like she wasn't really prepared for it, and then she gets into the interview and Dr. Mike opens it up with the following. Welcome to the Checkup Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of speaking to Vice President Kamala Harris. I was curious to know her plans surrounding healthcare costs, anti-science rhetoric, barriers to primary care, women's health, and the risks children face while eating overly processed foods for lunch. And then in italics, sort of her inner monologue is, WTF, this is clearly not a brief thing on RFK. She got mad at her staff because the plan for the podcast deviated from what she was told. At some point as a candidate, you need to just be able to talk.
And that's why I bring up the Charlemagne stuff. Yeah. Because it's like you need to be able to go off script. That's what makes people feel like you're a human.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it says later, a little bit later on, or actually right after that, it says, Dr. Mike was deeply knowledgeable, warmed up on all these issues and raring to go, as I would have been had I not just been ambushed by an unscheduled in-depth interview with no notice at the end of a 19-hour day. I slid a scribbled note across the table, in italics, where's my briefing? The staff looked at each other, they had nothing. When Dr. Mike said, are you getting your 7 to 9 hours of sleep these days? I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry.
That's actually kind of funny.
Not great.
Yeah, no, not great.
And like I sympathize with her like physical state, you know, being up constantly. She talks about how grueling it is to campaign. But again, when it comes to like these basic issues about healthcare on a healthcare podcast, you got to just be able to do it.
And it's like, to an extent, I do sympathize the idea with getting ambushed by an interview where you got to talk about things that you didn't think you were going to talk about can be jarring when you think that there's a clear set of expectations going in. But like I was saying at the beginning of the show, it's the fact that you highlighted this that I think is most concerning.
Yeah.
Aside from the messaging, aside from the scripting critique, it's the fact that this was an instance of the campaign that you thought you wanted to highlight.
Yeah.
Why? This just exists there to show people, look how unfairly I was treated. Even my staff wasn't good at this. There wasn't enough time. It was a mess.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. A huge thing for me throughout this book is that every other chapter centers on some way that she was mistreated. And beyond the Joe Biden stuff where she was genuinely mistreated, some of this just comes with the nature of what you're trying to do. And I just like running for the presidency is hard.
Yeah.
But somebody does it every 4 years. Somebody is able to get it done every 4 years. You got to be able to like take these on the chin. At some point, I don't want to hear about how hard it was for you. I want to hear about what you learned from it and what you would have done differently. And there's none of that. Yeah. Until the Dana Bash interview on page, I believe, 137, there was not an instance where she said, where she took accountability for anything, where she said something was wrong. And the only accountability she took in Dana Bash was, I should have said VP's a fake job.
Yeah. I should have said it differently. I should have phrased it differently or just given a different answer rather than like, there's deeper issues going on here. The one bit I will, or the few bits I will defend her on in terms of her media appearances is firstly Joe Rogan. Now, there's some stuff in here that's contemptible. talking about young men. Actually, I don't know if that's in this page, in this chapter or elsewhere.
I think that might be before. Let me find it, because honestly, that is.
But what I wanted to say about Rogan is that she goes through like the scheduling debacle that was trying to plan with Joe Rogan, and based on her account, Joe Rogan did just fuck her over.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Because they offered a date that for scheduling. The Harris team offered Rogan's team a date for scheduling. He said this is a personal day, and then that was the day he interviewed Donald Trump. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
That is fucked up bigly. Then the one other thing I'll defend her on in terms of interviews is she talks about the Brett Baier interview on Fox News. I know that Fox relentlessly lies, but hearing her or reading her describe it again was just like, damn, there really is no way to engage with these people because they will just lie to your face. And purposely mischaracterize or misrepresent things that you had said, or things like video clips from previously in the campaign. And it's like, there's really nothing you can do about that. And I do genuinely feel for her on that, because Fox News is a propaganda organization and there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, it is truly unfortunate, like how that goes. The Brett Baier stuff is interesting. I did find it very interesting, the Joe Rogan stuff, but like this is all also colored through the lens of she's going to write this to make her like look the best as possible, and that's true. But I do believe that Joe Rogan fucked her over.
I believe it.
That guy's a meathead. Like, there are a lot of instances in here where I'm like, okay, this may be a little embellished to make yourself look better. The Joe Rogan thing wasn't one of them.
Yeah, because
it's just. Yeah, he was putting his finger on the scales to tip towards Trump a little bit there. So that was interesting.
But so that's all the moments I had of like the sort of deeper issues within the campaign based on what she describes in the book, and then the interview things. And I do want to get into like the issues of the campaign, because there's a number of like specific issues we should talk about, stuff like Israel, stuff like immigration, trans issues. These things sort of come up repeatedly in the book. But the last word I want to say on this is that the thesis of this book is that Kamala Harris did not have enough time to campaign, right? 107 days simply isn't enough time. And having read through it all the way, having taken my notes, I think that just isn't true. And based on the polling data, she was doing her best compared to Donald Trump directly after the convention. It seems like 107 days was too long, because in the time after the convention were these various fuck-ups that her campaign endured that led to Trump closing the gap between the two of them. So I think I just don't believe that 107 days wasn't enough, which means the whole like thesis or core of this book is sort of bunk.
That's kind of my huge thing about this too, especially because of like sometimes things she mentions it in this like towards the end about how the election was within 1.5 percentage points. It was the closest election in like modern American history and whatnot. And she's mentioned that in the interviews since then too.
Yeah.
If this was the closest election in modern American history, I don't think you can get away with saying that 107 days wasn't enough, because you were right there.
Yeah.
Like, clearly there was just a margin of error that you needed to correct to be able to win this election.
Yeah.
And you didn't do it. In my mind, when it's so close, it's more down to individual choices that happened during those 107 days rather than it being the 107 days, especially compiled with what you just said.
Yeah, I want to be like totally clear, right? Like, Joe Biden fucked her up in a number of ways, in a number of inexcusable ways that need to be noted and is absolutely necessary when talking about this book, right? Like, he laid the foundation for the campaign, and throughout the campaign, he kept fucking with her, and I blame him for a lot of her woes. But yeah, like you said, like when she is polling ahead of Donald Trump after the convention and the race gets so close, then like the only conclusion I can draw is it's saying shit like the reason that the campaign fumbled towards the end was because on The View she said shit like nothing would be different. That to me is what makes up the difference. And again, I think if Joe Biden had been the candidate, it would have been like a 400 electoral point landslide.
Oh yeah.
Kamala Harris truly saved the Democratic Party at a presidential level from a total fucking disaster. But the fact that it was so close, and the fact that she closed the gap, and then the gap sort of widened a little bit away from towards Donald Trump, just speaks to me that, like, yeah, you made some key mistakes, and those mistakes don't get much introspection.
And it's also like, maybe not like a key mistake, like we can point to The View as being a clear mistake, but like there's a lot throughout this book where she talks about her being like pro-labor and like how much she respects unions and support unions. And I get the sentiment that she genuinely does fuck with labor issues, that she genuinely does believe in these things, but I didn't get that during the campaign.
Yeah.
I didn't feel, I don't recall her ever really messaging on that super hard, other than like key union endorsements like Sean Fain and whatnot.
I mean, same shit with Tim Walz, right? Like, she has some positive words for Tim Walz in this book, but his policies, the reason that the left liked him so much was because of shit like free universal school lunch.
Yeah.
She didn't run on that.
And what goes unexplained is the muzzling of Tim Walz.
Yeah.
Tim Walz in this book gets mentioned in terms of VP selection and in terms of his
up the debate.
bad debate performance, which is true.
Yes,
which
she's
is
right.
undeniably true. He did fuck that up bigly. But it's like, you don't mention that you picked him maybe because he had that great moment with the Republicans Are Weird thing that got a lot of play, and he proved that he was a good messenger in this. And you don't talk about why he stopped messaging at that point.
Yeah.
That's kind of damning. Like, what she chooses to include in this book and what she chooses to omit in this book, I think tell a lot.
Yeah.
I really do. But we're talking about Joe Rogan. We're talking about the bro vote. I found the section in the book that I highlighted, and I think I stopped reading for the night after I got here because something about this just really did piss me off. And it goes on page 176. Pundits speak about the bro vote, the frat boy flank. I don't think of them in those reductive terms. Instead, I think about these young voters coming of age during COVID, unnaturally isolated, their lives lonely when they should have been at their most social. At the very moment where their world should have been widening, it had contracted. For some, the voices that filled the void belong to Andrew Tate, Myron Gaines, and others who grab attention with get-rich or fitness content, then deliver arguments that feminism is damaging to masculinity and women need to know their place. That right there, nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a good message. I think that's something maybe she should have talked about during the campaign.
Yeah,
the idea that like young men aren't evil, even young men that like fuck with Andrew Tate, they've just been caught in this pipeline, they've been caught up in something bad. Condemnable, obviously, but it's understandable. It's a more human perspective, more human way to talk about this issue. What I do find condemnable is what comes next. Quote, polling revealed that many of these young voters didn't feel they knew me, and contrary to some predictions, they did not vote primarily on reproductive rights or Gaza or climate change. They voted on their perceived economic interests. In a post-election study conducted by Tufts University, 40% put the economy and jobs as their top issue. The next priority was abortion. 13% climate change was a top issue for 8%. Foreign policy, including Gaza, 4%. My policies, which would have helped young workers with protection for renters, a home down payment, a student debt relief, or elevating the opportunities of non-college graduates, or increasing access to capital, had not cut through the false notion that Trump was some kind of economic savant who would somehow be better for their personal financial position. In 107 days, I didn't have enough time to show how much more I would do to help them than he ever would, and that makes me immensely sad.
Yeah, it's like I didn't have enough time, so I just didn't try.
Exactly. And it's also just that your only excuse for like you losing young men in this is forces out of your control, the internet, and the fact that you didn't have enough time. There is no retrospection into like how you could actually reach a young voter.
Yeah.
In fact, she tells me exactly why she didn't come to this conclusion that she needed economic populism, because the pollsters told her that young men was going to turn out for abortion. I do think a lot of people were going to turn out for abortion. I think that's a genuine analysis. But the fact that you think that like young men, like that's the demographic that'd be like least likely to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like let's be serious for a second now. It's kind of ridiculous that you're saying that there wasn't anything you could have done to reach these people other than maybe had more time to talk about how you would give them a $30,000 down payment assistance or do a first-time home buyer loan so that they could put 1.5% down instead of 20% down on a house payment.
All too complicated.
You can't spit these out. The reason why people like Myron Gaines of Fresher Fit fame or Andrew Tate get young men is because they're fucking on message and they get out there and they spit it out and it's snippy and it's catchy and it's quick. Mm-hmm. You can do that with economic populism. You can do that in the way that Zoran Mamdani has when he's winning young white men in New York.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you read off the part of her talking about like young men are isolated and they've been sucked into these online algorithms and stuff like this. Those people that presumably were getting roped into voting for Trump by people like Aiden Ross were not going to turn out and vote for abortion rights.
Exactly.
Because their politics is based in hating women because they're sexually insecure. Like, I just don't know why that was the thought.
Yeah.
You know, like there's no analysis that would lead me to think that like, oh, despite being indoctrinated by Andrew Tate, young men will turn out for abortion rights.
Yeah.
They don't fucking care.
But it's like, even if she would have ran on the message that I read off first, like blah, 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 even though it's corny to say, I don't think of young men in these reductive terms like the bro vote. I do.
Yeah, I do.
I'm a part of this group and I do. I think it's valid to think of the electorate in terms of electoral groups. But that's just a whole different thing. Like, that's just bits where
there's no such thing as a constituency.
That's just like corniness that absolutely permeates every section of this book, where she's like, no, actually, I'm better.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of grandstanding.
The problem with me is I work too hard. My biggest weakness is I care too much.
One flaw. I care too much. I work too hard. I provide too much shareholder value. Me in an interview. You know what I'm saying? But it's just like, that's a compelling message. If you would have said, I wish I would have talked more about that on the campaign trail to try to reach some of these young men that are on the margins, that'd be understandable. That'd be forgivable. I'd be like, okay, there's some reflection there. But the fact that it's just, I didn't have enough time to talk to them about how neoliberalism would save them is where you lose me, man.
Yeah.
That's where you lose me. That's where this shit sucks so bad.
Yeah. And all of that being said, through all of her fumbles and through her lack of introspection into it, it's almost a certainty that she's running again. As is articulated in this book. Right at the beginning, there's this quote on page 22 that says, I now know that there is only one apprenticeship for president of the United States, and that is being vice president. I'd been a heartbeat away for 3.5 years. I knew the job. I knew I could do it. I wanted to do it. I wanted to do the work. And then all the way at the end, page 299, she's describing some advice or consolation she was given after the election loss. And somebody essentially says, like, you gave America your heart and soul. You gave it your all. And then she says, I did, and I'm not done. This is just confirmation that she is running again.
As close as you can get without her actually saying, I'm running to be the Democratic nominee in 2028.
Yeah. Yeah.
And throughout this book, there are really moments that feel like she's just fucking campaigning at me. So many times she just stops. The pacing just drags to a fucking halt because she stops to explain a policy.
Yeah. Or explain her deep history with the policy.
Was the time for explaining your policy not during the campaign trail? Like, are we not like way past this right now? We're both past the point where it's appropriate to be explaining these nitty-gritty policy details, and way before you should be explaining these nitty-gritty policy details. So the only thing I'm left to conclude is that you're putting this in here so that there's a record of you doing it, so that when you run on it in 2028, it's there.
Or the part that really gets me about that, I don't have it marked down here. It's when she's explaining how important like climate change policies are.
Yes,
like green energy policies. And then she basically says, well, anyways, I didn't run on any of that because I didn't have the time. And then she gets into talking about how she fucks with Israel big time. And it's like, okay, dude, this is unserious. I don't know. This is you trying to play cover for the fact that you didn't run on anything, any of like the green energy accomplishments that Biden had, or any green energy stuff that like people wanted out of you now, like people on the left. That's all that is.
She really did just choose not to run on things and then write a book and say, I just didn't have enough time to talk about it.
Yeah, she does that a bunch of different times.
God damn, man. God damn. And all these mentions of Gaza, she never once talks about like trying to send Richie Torres to Dearborn.
Yeah, or Bill Clinton to, I think the idea was to send Bill Clinton to Dearborn as well, but it got trashed.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it's funny because in the beginning when there's this little thing in the beginning where she's talking about all these calls that she made.
Yeah.
And one of like after she won the nomination to get people's support, one of those calls was to Bill Clinton and he said, send me anywhere. Like, and I'm just thinking in my head, oh, like Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah. She gets all of these messages from a bunch of different people. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton both respond saying like, he says, send me anywhere, make this your own campaign. The funny ones to me, the ones that get me are Bernie Sanders saying, I supported Joe because he was the strongest voice for the working class. Please focus on the working class, not just abortion.
Like that feels like you put this in here to shit on Bernie.
And if he did genuinely say that, like that's a crazy thing to say to a
woman, especially.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing to say. Gretchen Whitmer gets a shout out in here. The one that really gets me though, actually the funnier one is Gavin Newsom, who said hiking, we'll call back later. And then it says he never did. Yeah. But the one that gets me is Nancy Pelosi. And this brings me to my next point here. Nancy Pelosi said, I'm so sad about Joe. It's so tragic. My heart is broken. But now it's you. It's important there's a process. We have a great bench. We should have some kind of primary, not an anointment. Ooh. And this is an idea, the idea that we should have some sort of democratic procedure here, was firmly rejected by Kamala Harris. And she goes on to describe the process of her making a bunch of phone calls, getting the delegates, and then She goes on to say, quote, I went from call to call with the clarity that comes with that comes when stakes are high, stress is through the roof, and there's zero ambiguity. Some people I called would offer me support, then ask, what do you think the process should be? She says, if they thought I was down with a mini primary or some half-baked procedure, I was quick to disabuse them. How much more time would it take to have pulled that off? I could imagine the chaos of even trying to decide how to do it, much less actually doing it, as precious days slipped away. This is the process. This is in quotes. This is the process. If anyone wants to challenge me, they're welcome to jump in, but I intend to earn the support of the majority of the delegates, and I'm doing it right now. Each call took no more than a minute or two outside in the fierce afternoon heat. A media scrum swarmed. This is basically her saying that, like, we're not going to have any sort of democratic procedure now that Biden's dropped out because I'm already ahead of all of you.
Yeah.
And that's not great, man.
No, that's not great. And it is funny that she doesn't, like, yes, I do agree that there probably wasn't enough time for, like, an open primary, but in hindsight, I think there should have been a primary.
Just for legitimacy's sake.
I think it would have gotten her more support. I recognize that at the time, I was pro whatever the fuck was going on. It was a ridiculous time. Yeah. There was a lot going on, and I'm not going to critique her for that.
And she might have even just won it. Right?
Exactly. She would have won it. Like, there's no fucking question. She would have just won the fucking primary. But, like, I do think it's funny that she's like, well, I'm not going to do that because I already called everybody. Haha.
Yeah.
I got the 300 votes. And she tried to say that, like, that was the hard work.
And the calls began immediately. Like, right after Biden dropped out, she was ahead of it. And even though she didn't get much of a warning, she was still ahead of everybody else or anybody else that could have challenged her. And it is true that, like, the process is, in the wake of something like this happening, is just, like, the delegates choosing, right? Mm-hmm. But people don't view that as legitimately democratic because the delegates are Democratic Party loyalists, and the delegates are going to choose the party elite. So people wanted a bit more input, or at least a contest to prove that the Democratic Party cares a little bit about what the voters actually think. And that just didn't come across. And it doesn't come across when you're, like, so smug about it.
Exactly. And that's another thing. Just throughout this whole book, she is smug.
Yeah.
I had a whole highlight in here. I would tab down every moments of, like, insane self-glaze or, like, smugness, and I had to stop, man, because I was running out, and it's just, like, became too much. It just became every other fucking page was once again a moment where somebody treated her unfairly or something that Trump said that was a lie. And much like how she would grind the pacing of the book to a halt to explain a policy or talk about how she's so virtuous around an issue, there were many moments, particularly in the last half, where she would just stop whatever the fuck she was talking about to tell us something that Trump lied about and then explain in, like, 3 paragraphs or a page or even 2 why it was a lie. Yeah. And it's just like, I don't fucking care.
Yeah, why didn't you do this before?
Exactly. Why didn't you do this before? If you were doing this before, fucking kudos to you. But we are so past that point. Trump has lied a million times since then. Trump is doing really awful things right now. As you know, since you're saying you wrote this book and there are references to Elon Musk and Trump's breakup, like within this book, no references to the Epstein files, even though that was going on back then. Interesting, curious. But, like, it's just like, I genuinely got sick of the fact checking of Trump because it's like, we get it. Yeah. This guy fucking lies. What are you going to do about it? What message are you going to offer that can sway voters, that can get people to want to fuck with you? Because if you are constantly putting yourself on the defense, and if you are constantly, like, stopping to correct the record on things that Trump says, you are taking time away from running, like, a campaign that's positively about you and what you want to do. Yeah. And I know that during the campaign there was a struggle with that, and there was a public struggle with, like, what she wanted to do, but it's like, now more than ever, it was obvious that you should have just fucking kept going, aside from the big ones like Springfield, Ohio and whatnot. You should have just kept going. And when you're writing a book fucking half a year later, almost actually a year later, when it comes out, I don't care about when he called you Lion Kamala and Dougie, your quote Jersey boy, said that's all he got, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, more to that point, not just, like, you shouldn't have been focusing on fact checking in this book, which is, like, essentially, it's not a postmortem, but it's, like, in part a reflection on the campaign. You should have had more of an answer for why you lost and not just, I didn't have enough time. Because, like, even if you would have had the typical, like, 2-year runway or whatever, 1-year runway, Trump was still going to do all the same lies.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a difference. You would have had, sure, like double, triple the time to fact check them, but like that wasn't going to win.
He probably would have came up with better lies.
Yeah,
like
maybe.
he came up with better lies. He'd have thrown way more lies at you. Maybe some of them would have stuck more.
Yeah. Yeah.
like I don't know, man. I genuinely got sick of like the fucking the self glaze, the moments where she's fact checking Trump, and then when she stops the campaign. At one point, I noticed it. It was on page 144. She's talking about like she opens up this chapter talking about how much she loves small businesses. She's a huge fan of small businesses. Small businesses run the goddamn world.
Democrats need to shut the fuck up about small businesses. I say this as a small business.
Exactly. We run a small business, but there are small business tyrants that run around and abuse people more than like huge corporations do. Just straight up. Small businesses, a lot of them don't have to provide benefits.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's just like huge small business thing. When I became VP, the first meeting I scheduled outside of government departments was with small business owners. Come on, man. Like you say, we're small business owners. You're pandering to us and it's not working.
Yeah.
So please stop. But then she just completely pivots and talks about like a school shooting that happened in Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, school shootings suck. I don't fuck with those. But then she goes into this, quote, "What did I know? It didn't have to be this way. As VP, I drove the creation of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which led to the first major gun safety bill in nearly 3 decades, looking at gun trafficking and training of 14,000 new mental health workers to work in schools like Appalachia and help avert such tragedies. But we need to do much more." And then as a gun over myself, but that's funny.
I have a Glock.
That was a funny moment, but it's just like, why are you campaigning at me?
Yeah,
dude?
campaigning.
I voted for you. There's not a person that's buying this book that didn't fucking go out there and voted for you.
Yeah.
Like, just stop. Don't campaign at me.
It just feels a bit like holier than thou.
Yeah,
it's a little condescending.
It feels holier than thou, and I think part of why I'm so stuck on it is because I desperately wanted to come out of this book with like a better opinion of her.
Yeah.
Not that I had like a horrible opinion of her going in, but I desperately wanted to come out of this book thinking, yes, the Joe Biden stuff did like think like, oh yeah, that was worse than I thought. Everything else though, it's like she was worse than I thought.
Yeah.
She personally is saying she made these bad decisions. She's personally talking about how she hired the staff to make these bad decisions. She's defending the hiring of Jen O'Malley Dillon and David Plouffe. She's glazing David Plouffe.
Made David Plouffe look good.
Oh my God, it's nuts. And I know David Plouffe's bad because David Plouffe couldn't even make himself look good on Pod Save America.
Yeah, that's the friendliest environment you'll find yourself in, dog.
Exactly.
Softball questions.
Those were your like coworkers, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You all worked in the Obama administration. You all came up under Obama.
But even the Plouffe knew that like we need to separate from Biden.
Yeah.
And it was just her that was leading the charge to stay so close.
And she didn't listen to him.
She didn't.
Like
listen.
half of this part of this book exists just to make sure David Plouffe can still get jobs in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and JOD.
It's actually absurd, but just like, don't campaign at me, man. I wanted like so much more substance than what we got in here. And I recognize that's probably an expectations reality situation. This is my first like fucking political biography book kind of thing that I've read. And so I just don't think I was prepared for the amount of I'm the most perfect person ever possible. Look how awful everyone else is that I got.
Yeah, we don't have the Hillary Clinton what happened but cracked open side by side.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We are just sort of reviewing this and only in the context of what just happened. But yeah. The congregation is missing someone. And that someone, dear listener, is you. The congregation awaits you over on our Discord. If you go into the description of this episode right now, there will be a link to join the Head in the Office Discord where you will find more than 1,000 like-minded individuals for you to interact with. And maybe most importantly, we'll be there.
1,000 members strong. It is a burgeoning community of HITO heads.
That's right.
Ready to receive you into their arms. Make you a part of the community. Vest you as a HITO head.
Over on Discord, we have discussions. You can interact with other HITO heads. And maybe, for some fun, we can do some community events. And we know that you want to be a part of that. Only available over on the official Head in the Office Discord. Speaking of substance, though.
Okay.
We got to talk about some of the issues in this book. Not issues with her examination, not issues with the Biden administration, but issues like political issues.
Like what she ran on.
Yeah.
Like things, like her defense of things that she chose to, well, maybe not chose to make her campaign about, that her campaign ended up being about in retrospect.
Yeah, and the first one here I want to talk about, of course, is Israel and the number of times the fucking protests are mentioned. And specifically protests of her at her rallies, people that were protesting on behalf of Gaza, because, of course, she was a part of the administration that had facilitated the genocide that we still see unfolding before us. And a quick note on this, right? We posted a number of clips criticizing her through this book on the basis of her position on Netanyahu and Gaza. And we're going to go over, I think, these passages again, just because these pages are just so influential.
They're so good, man. They're so good. They've lived in my head.
These few pages here, 54 to 56, just incredible. And we'll get into that in a moment. But I want to say, our position on the vice presidency is the vice president doesn't do shit, right? And this is true. Kamala Harris was not the one making the decision to send bombs to Israel. The issue, though, is that when she was on the campaign trail, she made no indication that she would cut off offensive aid. There was no commitment to an arms embargo. All she said is that she wanted a ceasefire, which is the same thing Biden was saying. And she did have power and the ability to make a distinction between herself and the Biden campaign, specifically on this issue, which so many activists on the left wanted, and she didn't do it.
Yes.
And to the extent that she had the ability to do that, the vice presidency and candidacy for president, which is more to the point, that has power.
And she's having meetings with Netanyahu.
Yeah.
She mentioned in this book she had a meeting with Netanyahu. Things could have been different.
Yeah, so now that that's out of the way, I just wanted to explain the criticism because just in case anybody in our audience was confused. Again, this section comes right after she's explaining how she simply doesn't have time to talk about climate change, but I certainly have time to talk about Netanyahu. And I'll just read this again for the sake of this being a comprehensive book review. She says, quote, after the exhilaration of being with the teachers, people I greatly admired, I was heading to a meeting with Netanyahu about whom I was more ambivalent. What I'm not ambivalent about is Israel's security. As a young girl, I carried around a little blue box for the Jewish National Fund, soliciting support to plant trees in Israel. I believed Israel was right to respond to the atrocities of October 7, but the ferocity of Netanyahu's response, the number of innocent Palestinian women and children killed, and his also the innocent men. There are innocent men in Palestine.
Yeah.
No mention of the innocent men.
Yeah, wait a second.
And his failure to prioritize the lives of the hostages had weakened Israel's moral position internationally and created angry dissent within Israel itself. I won't go through the exact same take I offered on our little preview of this, the last episode, but the take essentially here is that you did have the ability to push back on Netanyahu as the candidate for president, and you drew no distinction between yourself and Biden. That sucks.
And it's funny because Biden's fingers, really, they are on here. This is both an issue of the choices that she made in the campaign, and there is a little bit of bleed over from what happened in the administration she was a part of. I want to go back to page 51 and talk about something that we had talked about when she first won the nomination. That was the speech she gave where she was calling for a ceasefire and whatnot. And this is what she has to say about that event. In Selma, Alabama, at the commemoration of Bloody Sunday, when civil rights marchers were attacked and beaten once they'd crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I gave a strong speech on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Desperate people had been shot when they swarmed a food truck, and I spoke of families reduced to eating leaves or animal feed, women prematurely giving birth with little to no medical care, and children dying from malnutrition and dehydration. I reiterated my strong support for Israel's security and called on Hamas to release the hostages and accept the ceasefire agreement then on the table. I also called on Israel for greater access to aid. It was a speech that had been vetted and approved by the White House and the National Security Council. It went viral, and the West Wing was displeased. I was castigated for apparently delivering it too well.
Yeah.
That's not what they were upset about.
First of all, it's Biden administration obviously fucking things up here.
Yeah, they fucked you over with this
But
one.
also just her depiction of what I believe was the Flower Massacre. I think that's what she's describing here. It says, I gave a strong speech on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Desperate people had been shot when they were swarmed by a food truck. Who did the shooting?
Yeah.
Not mentioned in this book, right? It's just they were shot. I wonder if somebody intentionally shot them or not. I wonder if Israel played any role whatsoever in the death of these innocent people, or the fact that, as she described, people had been reduced to eating animal feed.
Yeah.
I wonder if our ally played any role in it.
Once again, just another phenomenal example of any time the Gaza issue comes up in this book, it's I fuck with Israel's security so heavy, and also fuck Hamas, bring back the hostages.
Yeah.
I have another quote from page 55 that I think is new to the audience here. She's talking about her meeting with Netanyahu, and she says, we'd outlined the terms of negotiation for the ceasefire back in May and made frustratingly little progress with either Israel or Hamas. If I'm remembering my coverage of this event on my number one geopolitics correctly, I believe eventually there was a ceasefire that was agreed to, and which party broke that ceasefire?
Hamas agreed to a lot of ceasefires.
Hamas agreed to a couple different ceasefires. Yeah. Hamas agreed to a lot of terms. Which party was the sticking point here?
Yeah.
Which people involved in this these agreements and negotiations were refusing to, I don't know, negotiate?
Well, and this is a repeated thing. This is something happening to Trump right now. Yeah. Trump's getting low-key pissed off at Netanyahu. probably won't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But there was just a quote unquote ceasefire, and then literally like 15 minutes later, Israel struck Gaza again. Like this is what Israel does. This is the Israeli playbook when it comes to dealing with Gaza, the IDF's playbook. And it's just a shame that both parties fucking buy into this. And she felt the need to like, I don't know. It's so weird the way she talks about Israel in this book. It feels like she got paid to write it this way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it feels written by AIPAC.
And it's just like, her feelings on, no, I can't say her feelings on Israel in this book almost mirror her feelings on Joe Biden, because her feelings on Joe Biden are incredibly weird.
Yeah.
But her feelings on Israel are very AIPAC vetted and approved.
It's just like every single time she brings up Israel, it's almost like a reflexive need to say, I also support Israel's security.
Yeah. Like
every time. And I wonder if like did somebody who read the book or ghost wrote the book for her or something like that, did they like, I don't know, was there some requirement placed that, like, I don't know what's happening
There
here.
is no way that anyone could walk away from this book thinking that she does not fuck with Israel super heavy.
Yeah.
Because at every moment she constantly reiterates it, especially in the beginning of the book when she's like establishing everything.
Yeah.
And it's so absurd, man. We've been getting comments recently for the last couple months as the audience has grown a little bit about the I condemn Hamas and all political violence and condemning Hamas all the time. And like part of it's because like I condemn Hamas type shit, you know what I'm saying?
Type shit.
But most of it is because it's a bit, because when October 7th first broke out, you could not talk about anything that was happening without senators screaming at you to condemn Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
You could not have a Senate hearing with anything about it without opening every statement that you made with I condemn Hamas, October 7th was bad, now I can speak.
Yeah.
And so it's like kind of like a bit poking fun at that, but she like does that here.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
this is like a real thing among politicians.
I also want to say on the I condemn Hamas and I condemn all political violence. The second part of that is fully out of a sense of self-preservation.
100%.
So
yeah.
Don't comment on that. Don't leave any comments about like, why do you condemn political violence?
Because obviously I condemn political violence.
Feds watching, chill the fuck out. Time and space, time and place, people. Time and place.
But it's like this book was an example of why we do that.
Yes.
Because it's so absurd to have to. You guys, it's okay to say that what's happening in Gaza is bad without going back 2 years ago and saying October 7th was bad.
Yeah.
Like it just straight up, and I don't know why that's not understood. It's like you have to have kid gloves on when you're a politician and you talk about Israel, or a prospective politician and talk about Israel.
What would the fucking analog be? There's been like 60 October 7ths in Gaza at least.
Probably.
Like, what are we talking about?
Probably something like that.
What are we talking about? And then I want to fast forward a little bit to page 56, where she's talking about she gets away from the meeting with Netanyahu and stuff like that, and she's talking about how the issue is sort of dividing Americans. Which, to be more specific, it's not dividing Americans; it's dividing Americans from the parties. A lot of Americans wanted offensive aid to end, even back then. But she says, "quote: It was distressing to see how this issue was dividing Americans. 10,000 incidents of anti-Semitic hate, vandalism, and more than 150 physical assaults. A 6-year-old Palestinian child stabbed to death, his mother wounded by their landlord in Illinois. Synagogues, temples, and Jewish community centers scrambling to protect themselves with new security measures. 3 Palestinian college students shot in Vermont, leaving one paraplegic. Posters of Israeli hostages defaced and torn down from the walls in New York City. Campus protests, some of which harassed and threatened Jewish students and created an atmosphere of tension and fear. These rising expressions of hate were chilling." My takeaway from this mention is, first of all, the campus protest is just fully, there's no justification for including it here. But also, like, there's a sort of asymmetry in the way she talks about anti-Palestinian hatred and violence here in the United States and anti-Semitic violence. Both obviously bad, right? Of course. Any form of bigotry we're obviously going to condemn. But what is it with this need to like make it seem as though in the context of Palestinians suffering a genocide that like shit is like worse for another group of people? Like, it's just, it's a weird comparison, right?
And it's also like what? No acknowledgement of something that happened to a Palestinian here was not couched in between things that may have happened to Jewish people here. Well, and I don't even want to say like may have, because I feel like that could be misattributed. It's not necessarily like may have. Like some anti-Semitic instances did happen. But what the broader critique here is that they did not like necessarily happen to the level that she's implying here. Yeah. It is intentional for her to go and start this paragraph with 10,000 incidents of anti-Semitic harassment harassment. Where are we getting those numbers?
Well, yeah, she says 10,000 incidents of anti-Semitic harassment, and then gets to
individual instances of things happening to Palestinians, and then ends it with college protests that were like, you can't quantify whatever the fuck happened at college protests.
Yeah, many of the protests, by the way, led by Jewish students.
Yes, right? Jewish students at these protests, not even just on college campuses, throughout places like New York City. A lot of these protests led by Jewish student groups. Like, this is just, it's not fair, and it's been a talking about that we've been fighting against for like a while.
Yeah.
And it's absurd. Like, it's as if she's painting anything that could have possibly been anti-Semitic, which I feel as if maybe she's hiding anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism, because I think she's of the lineage that believes that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. In these numbers, it paints the picture like anti-Semitic violence was systemic, but anti-Palestinian violence was just some individual instances here and there.
That was my thought too. And I know the point of this little segment that I read is to point out that like there's bad things happening on both sides.
Yeah.
But she clearly did not paint it out to be symmetrical, and it flattens like what we are actively supporting on a government level in Israel, what's happening to the people in Gaza. So bad, I think, altogether.
Anti-Semitism, bad. We don't fuck with that. We've been talking about on this podcast for a while how we don't fuck with that. Anti-Islamophobia, also bad.
Yeah, and then on Israel specifically, there's a moment on page 87 where she just sort of uncritically talks about how Israel pulled off a, quote, audacious assassination of Hamas's political leader right in the heart of Tehran. Just no conversation.
Come on, like, that was bad. That sucked.
Yeah, no conversation about why that might be problematic. And then I think the rest of that chapter is just her getting into a description of, just like a description of the VP vetting process.
Yeah.
So she starts her day off with, Israel did this thing, which I'm going to uncritically mention here. Also, Josh Shapiro is kind of a freak. Like, I don't know, man. It's just weird to me. It's weird to me.
Once again, I have to go back to page 57 and highlight the quote where she says, why weren't they protesting at Trump rallies? Like, come on, man. What the fuck? This is not serious. This isn't a serious, like, way to do this. You know what I'm saying? And then again, have to highlight what we highlighted in the preview. I sincerely reaffirmed my commitment to Israel's right to defend itself. I added that how Israel did that mattered. Once again, it does not matter if you do not condition aid, if you do not want to pressure the administration to do anything differently. But something we did not talk about was, once again, a page before, because this shit was just gold, on page 55. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Not on page 55. She was talking about like her meetings with Netanyahu and how Netanyahu had treated Joe Biden. Here it is. She's talking about Joe Biden's loyalty. You know, I'm a back up a little bit and just read you this full section so you have the context. Netanyahu was bent on undermining Joe Biden, one of Israel's staunchest allies. I had pleaded with Joe when he spoke publicly on the issue to extend the same empathy he showed to the suffering of Ukrainians to the suffering of innocent Gazan civilians. Interesting that you had pleaded that, but it did not seem like you really extended that much throughout your campaign, other than maybe a little bit more acknowledgement of Palestinian suffering, but that's besides the point. And it's
like,
here.
What do we think the difference is?
Yeah, and it also didn't manifest in anything real.
I'm coming to realize, and maybe this took me too long, especially because like we live in a post 9/11 world, but I'm starting to feel that there are a lot of people in the U.S. that just don't fuck with Arab Americans.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Or just like Arab people generally, or Muslims generally. And I think like that was like a blind spot for me.
Yeah.
That I think I'm realizing now, that especially because of all this happening with Palestine, but also because we have a Muslim man running for Senate in Michigan, a lot of people just reflexively don't like brown people. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, it's
you
crazy.
People are insane.
Yeah.
Like there's no other explanation. Anyway.
Yeah, but no, it is very important that like she is saying that like she was trying to get Joe Biden to be like more compassionate towards Palestinians, but she didn't do much more.
Yeah.
It was all just about saying he's more compassionate towards Palestinians, continuing with the quote, but he couldn't do it. While he could passionately state, quote, I am a Zionist, his remarks about innocent Palestinians came off as inadequate and forced. What? But he couldn't do it while he could passionately state, I am a Zionist. What about being able to passionately state you're a Zionist? Like, has anything to do with you being able to passionately...
I am loyal to the Israeli project.
Whatever. The thing I like really highlighted was, quote, that loyalty meant nothing to Netanyahu. He wanted Trump in the seat opposite him, not Joe, not me. Netanyahu wanted the guy who would acquiesce to his every extreme proposal for the future of Gaza's inhabitants and add his own plan for a land grab by his developer cronies. I think that this quote right here on page 56 really underscores and makes worse everything else that she said said about the issue and everything else that has happened about the issue. Because when you are saying that Trump will kowtow to Netanyahu and his land grab, you are admitting that you believe that Netanyahu has genocidal intent. Because what else would you mean by saying that he is doing a lab grab? And what else could you mean by his extreme proposal for the future of Gaza's inhabitants? At this time, it was kicking Gaza out.
And it's saying that like Netanyahu isn't loyal to us. He's loyal to Trump. He wants Trump at the table. So I just didn't say anything about it.
Trump will let him do the genocide and we'll slow it down.
But not even slow it down. Like we'll just like not accelerate it as much as Trump will. And it's like when the lieutenant governor of Michigan, Garland Gilchrist, can get out here and say Netanyahu is committing a genocide in Gaza, I have to believe that Kamala Harris could have done it too.
Absolutely.
And Garland Gilchrist saying that isn't because even if he gets elected governor, he can even do anything about it. Governors don't have a foreign policy role, but he's saying it because he knows that voters want to know like where your moral compass is at. That's genuinely important. And when you can recognize that Netanyahu is like a shithead, a bad leader, a fascist, but you can't get out here and do anything about it, that's when you lose some credibility.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not acceptable to a lot of voters. Two other things I want to mention about Gaza. One is about the Palestinian spokesperson at the DNC. But the first thing is a quote from her getting protest at a rally. Again, another mention of the protesters.
Okay. Which page is this?
Page 111, 87 days to the election. She says, quote, "There had been hecklers at a rally in Phoenix the night before, and once again I addressed them directly. I'd been talking about healthcare as a human right, even though no universal healthcare, that wasn't a thing that she ran on, when a small group of Gaza protesters interrupted. Okay, guys, I said, let's talk about Gaza for a moment. We all want this war to end and to get the hostages out, and I will work on it full time when I am president, as I have been."
That's not what they wanted from you. They want an arms embargo. It was the conversation. There was a conversation when she first got the nomination or became the nominee about whether or not she would be for an arms embargo, because she had met with the group in Michigan. I can't remember exactly which group. I believe it was Uncommitted.
It was Uncommitted.
She met with Uncommitted in Michigan, and wasn't that this day actually?
I don't know.
Either way, she met with Uncommitted, then she got protested, and she was annoying about it. And all these things and the ceasefire comments before, only for her to just come out and not do any of that.
Yeah.
It was all just kind of performative. It's so obvious that she just wanted people to shut the fuck up about the issue.
Yeah.
All you had to do was fucking call for an arms embargo, and that's it.
Give a little bit more lip service, push back against Israel at all. Just calling for a ceasefire was the Biden position at the time.
Yeah.
Biden had also said, I think in May of 2024, it's time for a ceasefire. And then he said, we agreed to a ceasefire, and Netanyahu was like, meh.
And Trump is Biden coded now. Everybody's just every American president is Biden about this.
Everyone is Biden, dude.
Everywhere is Biden. Are you continuing on with 111?
No, but was there something else?
I got some more things I want to talk about, at least at 111. Okay. Right below the quote you just read, she says, "That morning, we woke to news of an Israeli airstrike that had killed at least 80 people in Gaza. As I left the hotel, I took questions from the press in the parking lot, underlining yet again that even though Israel had every right to go after Hamas, far too many civilians were being killed, and that Israel had a responsibility to avoid these deaths." And that is it. That's the beginning of this chapter, 87 days to the election on August 10th. You know what she does for the rest of the fucking chapter?
I know what she does. I know what she does.
She talks about how big her fucking crowds are and how sometimes the fire marshals were like, "Yeah, your crowd's just too big." And she's like, "No." Are you fucking kidding me? It is a choice to juxtapose one, the fucking cold-blooded murder of 80 people, at least 80 people in Gaza by her admission, and the protest that she's receiving at her own rallies with, "Yeah, but people love them though. People love coming to my rallies."
And you know what she did at the very end of that chapter? She says the CWU, which I believe is a union of some kind.
I have that highlighted too.
Asked in earlier discussions that we eliminate tax on tips. And my policy team had been working on our proposal before Trump's half-baked announcement. I'd much rather give a tax cut to low-wage service workers than billionaires, but unlike Trump, I work to pair that exemption with an increase in the minimum wage, because the sad fact is," and then she gets into a bunch of policy mumbo-jumbo, essentially saying that I actually had the idea first.
Come on.
And right after defending genocide, essentially.
Whether or not you had that idea first, the placement of the chapter here is just crazy.
Psychotic, dude.
But whether or not you had that idea first, frankly, just doesn't matter at this point. it just doesn't fucking matter at this point, dude.
Yeah.
Like, just leave that out. It makes you look petty.
And then I do want to touch on the last bit about Palestine is she does talk about how there wasn't a Palestinian spokesperson at the DNC. And in fact, she's talking about her speech in Gaza. She's talking about at the convention how they were worried, or the staffers were worried, that it would be similar to the 1968 convention where there was a bunch of people that protested, again in Chicago, same place that this convention was held. And then she says at the end of this, on page 131 at the end of this paragraph, says, quote, "But there was tension and some bitterness that we had not given a speaking slot to a Palestinian spokesperson." And then she goes on to describe all the praise she got for her speech in the section about Palestine, ending with a quote from John Favreau from fucking Pod Save America that says, quote, "She looked and sounded more presidential in this convention speech than almost any other candidate I've seen accept the nomination." What are we doing? Yeah. You acknowledge that the DNC did not have a Palestinian spokesperson when that was one of the major issues among the base, and then you quote praise for yourself. Like,
it's just so profoundly out of touch.
Yes.
It truly is. And that's, besides what she wrote on like those pages 54, 55, 56, and 57, where she establishes that she's just brain broken on the issue. Mm-hmm. Every other time she mentions Palestine, it's like, can you fucking believe? Get a load of these guys. Get a load of these fucking protesters, man. They suck, don't they?
It's fucking sickening, dog. It's just like you said, it's so profoundly out of touch and just demonstrates that she viewed those protesters and just people calling for a change in policy from her campaign with utter contempt. Mm-hmm. Complete condescension in the way that she talked to these people. She did not give a fuck about them. And that does not endear me to her at all. Again, I want to like Kamala Harris. I really do. But she shows me time and time again that that's just not a thing that's in the cards for me.
Man, there's another moment on Palestine. This is the last thing I have on this as well, other than just the fact that protesters at her rallies are recurring characters throughout this entire book, and they're always treated with this air of annoyance. But this one I thought was great. It was just on page 231. I don't really have a direct quote to read out here, but she basically compares Palestinian pro-Palestinian protesters with anti-abortion protesters. That day, Mark Cuban was traveling with me to speak about entrepreneurship. Another thing about this book, and this is a thing with liberals in general, not just her, because I don't want people to think I'm doing this because like, oh, ladies love celebrities and whatnot, because that's not true and that's corny. Liberals love celebrities.
Oh yeah, libs.
Because throughout this book, there are so many references to all the celebrities that like came out and supported her, and oh yeah, this celebrity opened up for me here, and this celebrity did this, and I got this endorsement.
Quavo
mentioned this celebrity, and it was so cool to get to talk to my friend Quavo, and Trump doesn't walk it like he talks it. Like, it's just like corny.
Yeah, and I feel like the celebrities that liberals will bring up in books like this are people that alienate the voters they say they're trying to win. Like, these celebrities already agree with you. They are in the sort of liberal elite orbit. And it's just like, who is this for other than yourself?
Exactly. You're not winning many people with these like endorsements that you're like gathering from these people. And she mentions freedom was her campaign song like 30 different times. And it's like, okay, man, like, come on, man. Like, I think that like I'm just a person who wants like, I think the liberals will eat this book up.
Yeah. Yeah. Your liberal parents, my favorite viewer, will love this.
They will love this, and they will eat up every fucking word in this book as long as they don't have a good opinion about Gaza. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's going to be that. And I wholly recognize that this wasn't for me. I want theory.
Yeah.
I want her to do theory about her own election. I want accountability. I want analysis. I want direction. And I didn't get that here, and I'm still like jarred about it. But back to this like reading. Fucking Mark Cuban, University of Wisconsin. As we approached the campus, Gaza protesters held signs saying "Killer Kamala." Later at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, it was no ceasefire, no vote. And then in the middle of an upbeat rally in the university gym, there were two anti-abortion protesters. I was in the middle of my speech, laying out Trump's direct responsibility for the Peter of Roe, when I heard cries of "Liar, you're lying." I smiled in the direction of the hecklers. "Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally," I said. "I think you meant to go to the smaller one down the street." The audience roared with laughter.
Yeah. And then she does talk about how that was mischaracterized, which again, media lies to make her look bad.
No, of course. But my thing here is why are we comparing Palestinian protesters to anti-abortion protesters and saying that they're like the same level of nuisance?
Yeah.
That's where for me it's like, come on, man.
Or as if they're like morally equivalent.
Exactly, because that's what it is. She not uncritically, but she's going on here and just saying, yeah, these Gaza protesters had a sign that said "Killer Kamala" and "No ceasefire, no vote." It's like, yeah.
Yeah, that's an issue.
Yes, that's like the thing. That's like what they care about. And the direct thing that you talk about after that is anti-abortion protesters. These are not people who are on like the same level of an issue. Like these two issues are not the same.
Yeah. Well, I think people might defend her by just saying like, well, that's what happened at the rally, so that's why it's in the book.
Exactly, and that's why she's not critically examining the role of either of those things.
Yeah.
That's not why she's talking about why the two protesters are different. It's just what happened. And I think she's going to get away with a lot in this book by just saying, well, that's just what happened. I was just talking about what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's annoying.
Yeah. There's a few other inclusions of other issues aside from Palestine that I want to talk about. She does talk about transgender issues towards the end of this book on page 224 here.
Yeah, she does.
And she specifically talks about them in the purview of the one like Kamala's for they them ad. And then just like transgender demonization broadly and how that was like painted onto the Harris campaign. And she's got this section here where she genuinely goes out to bat for transgender people, talking about how transgender people deserve all the same rights that everybody else has, liberty, equality, pursuit of happiness, that transgender people are a small minority of the population and they get a bunch of hate for no reason, that less than 10 people in 2024 played on women's college sports teams, that like this is just not a real issue. None of this was present in the campaign.
No, it was so genuinely compelling to read about that.
Yeah.
And I was surprised and shocked when she's talking about the trans ad in terms of like, yeah, this is bullshit. I respect the trans community. I've done a lot for them. Like I've done a lot of work defending them, blah, blah, blah. It's a great cause. Not a lot of trans people do this. Only to then go and say.
Yeah, she goes on about a page later and she says, quote, the ad also said I supported biological men competing against our girls in their sports. That is not my position. I agree with the concerns expressed by parents and players that we have to take into account biological factors such as muscle mass and unfair athletic advantage when we determine who plays on which teams, especially in contact sports. With goodwill and common sense, I believe we can come up with ways to do this without vilifying and demonizing children.
You're vilifying and demonizing children.
This ignores the fact that the only reason this is a quote-unquote issue is to demonize trans people.
Yes.
There is no interpretation of the existence of this issue without understanding it as an intentional way to demonize trans people, because as she said 2 pages earlier, it's not a fucking problem. And the fact that she thinks she needs to talk about it at all, same with Pete Buttigieg when he brought this issue up on his own, speaks to the fact that they don't understand the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
It's so fucking annoying. There's an entire contingent within the Democratic Party that is considering abandoning trans people, and the people at the head of the party do not understand anything about this issue. And it's so frustrating.
And she just threw that in.
Yes.
This chapter would have been damn near perfect if it wasn't for that one fucking sentence. Because she then goes on to talk about like how they defended against the ad and how people said she wasn't defending against it, but she was only running ads in swing states with some specific approach that worked best in testing. And she ultimately like concludes it by saying, I wish we could have gotten the message across that there isn't a distinction between they, them, and you. The pronouns that matter is we. And while that's like a corny message, I think it works. And I think that's the way that you handle something like that as a Democrat.
But that wasn't in the campaign.
It wasn't in the campaign. Or she says she wishes she could have gotten that across. Why didn't you, man?
Yeah.
Like, come on. Fuck, why are we throwing trans people under the bus again?
It's
you
right
did
there,
not
man.
have to have that fucking sentence.
Yeah.
You didn't.
Yeah, like it's so fucking disappointing that so many top Democrats keep doing this. Gavin Newsom did this, Pete Buttigieg did this, now Kamala Harris is doing this. And it's not... Like, it is true that the typical voter, if you take the question to them about trans women participating in women's sports, they will have, like, a conservative opinion, right?
Yes.
It's true that Republicans have a lead on this issue. But the first thing is, number one, it doesn't motivate votes. Nobody goes to the polls because of this issue. And if they are going to the polls, they're never going to vote for a Democrat. And two, it's just the fact that you don't understand that this issue is entirely framing. As she says in the book, as I read, she says that only 10 trans people participated in women's sports. You need to reframe the issue around the fact that Republicans are just fucking freaks that are so focused on the genitals of people that they will never actually meet, and they are using this issue to disguise the fact that they have no other solutions.
Yeah.
That is how you talk about this issue. You don't play on Republican framing. And the fact that Democrats like Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, and Kamala Harris are willing to even talk about this issue, to even entertain that it might be an issue, tells me that they don't fucking understand what they're doing.
Nobody votes on it.
No.
Nobody fucking votes on that shit at all whatsoever. It's not an issue that matters. When you get it, you should just pivot away.
And importantly, it's a gateway into allowing more transphobic hate. Like this, it's a foot in the door to allow the further demonization of trans people. And conceding the ground whatsoever shows that you don't know what you're doing and that you're okay with allowing this kind of hate to seep in. It needs to be rejected outright if we actually want to protect trans people, which it seems like she does, but she just doesn't know how to actually do. And it's just so goddamn frustrating to see stuff like this from a fucking Democrat that's going to run again. And probably be the front runner.
And probably mention this and probably make this a part of her campaign because they're afraid of being pegged as being these like fucking liberal, crazy liberals that fuck with the crazy kid stuff.
Yeah, and she does the exact same thing for immigrants, which is the next part I wanted to talk about. It's on 194.
Yeah.
She talks about immigrants. She talks about how Trump will just outright lie about immigration, that immigrants are less likely to commit violent crime and property crime than American-born individuals, that even cities with more immigrants have similar or lower rates of violent and property crimes than areas with fewer immigrants. She does all of this going out to bat for immigration, and then ends the section with this. I did not have time in 107 days to undo 10 years of Trump's demonization of immigrants. All I could do was show that we had taken measures that were working, and I took the issue seriously, and we would continue to press for comprehensive reforms that we needed. She essentially says that I didn't have enough time to undo the hate of immigrants that Trump has pushed for 10 years, so I didn't try. So instead, I pushed for that conservative border bill. And in fact, later on in that same section, she talks about how Trump didn't build enough of the wall.
No, not only does she not talk about how Trump didn't build enough of the wall, but I'm going to read it because I found this insane. Quote, Trump had once staged a photo op touting his big, beautiful wall, but he'd done it in front of a section that Obama built.
Yeah.
One of the many things I was prepared to say at the debate that was one observation I regretted not deliberating.
It's just, what are we doing?
Much like how it frustrated me when she spent time to correct Trump's lies throughout the book, there's so many moments where she just points out Trump's hypocrisy. We have been 9 years past Trump being a hypocrite, man. It's fucking old news. Let's focus on something else. Let's focus on the vision you say you didn't have enough time to talk about and actually build a message around immigration rather than just being Republicans about the issue. And when you say that you don't have enough time in 107 days to undo what Trump did in 10 years, I can respect that.
That's true.
But that ignores the problem that 6 years ago, Democrats stopped talking about it. When Joe Biden won re-election in 2020, he stopped talking about immigration and, in fact, continued a lot of what Trump did when it came to it.
And she should know that. She was assigned the job of quote-unquote border czar.
That was her job that she was saying people didn't talk about enough.
She complained that the Biden administration didn't help her with messaging along what she had actually accomplished. And she clearly understands the issue of immigration, right? She talks about how the demonization of immigrants is completely unearned, unwarranted, and unfair and bigoted. And instead she just says, but I was a conservative on immigration because I just had to be.
And this is another example of Democrats constantly chasing voters to where they are rather than creating a message that will actually bring them to
chasing
them, right?
voters who are being led by Republicans.
Exactly. The Democrats are the fucking got a carrot on a stick in front of them. The carrot's the voters and the Republicans are controlling the stick and where it goes, man. It's ridiculous. And I think that's summarized in this quote from page 194 when she said, immigration had surged and to some it felt like an invasion. We couldn't gaslight the people who felt that way by denying the problem. The only people being gaslit here is fucking me having to hear from you that a lot of this is serious. And the people, the gaslighters are the conservatives that are telling them the thing. You are not gaslighting somebody by telling them that they've been lied to for the last 10 years. That's not gaslighting. That's getting somebody out of being gaslit.
When Republicans lie and pander to anxieties about white replacement or whatever, you can't outright just say they're lying to you and they're wrong. And in fact, there is no invasion. You don't have to capitulate because when you capitulate, it just drums up more hate of immigrants, which is going to play to the benefit of Trump.
It is not abuse to go up to someone who's in an abusive dynamic and say, hey, I think you need to get out. Hey, I think the person, your abuser, is telling you lies to keep you here. That's not abuse. It's not gaslighting to correct the record. And it's so fucking frustrating to me that Democrats actually think that they need to engage with this narrative seriously just because people believe it. It's like what we said a couple episodes ago. I'm sick and tired of having to deal with conservatives' feelings about issues while listening to them tell me that dealing with trans people's feelings is ruining the world. Clearly one of these feelings is more politically potent than the other.
And again, we've made this point many times. You don't get to this point that we are in this country with immigration without the Democratic Party. We don't get to the point where ICE is running around with more funding than the IDF without the Democratic Party that had continued to fund ICE through the Obama administration and through the Biden administration. It just doesn't happen without Democrats capitulating on the issue of immigration. And it seems Kamala Harris is not interested in doing anything else.
Yeah.
And something tells me that when she does have a longer runway, when she gets a full primary, and hell, maybe she'll win and have the general election, I don't think she's going to offer a different message. I would love to be proven wrong. I would love that if she does end up winning the primary in 2028, that she does something completely different and argues in favor of immigration boldly, but I have a feeling that's not what's going to happen.
No, I absolutely don't think it's what's going to happen. And it's because of the things that she's choosing to write and highlight in her own goddamn book. Unless there are polls that tell her that voters want you to focus on a pathway to citizenship other than an invasion, we're not going to get anything about that. Right. We are just going to get Republican light rhetoric about how, actually they are like low-key violent. Mm-hmm. We're going to get more moments of Joe Biden at the State of the Union talking about Laken Riley.
Yeah, being killed by an illegal.
Yeah.
That was his word.
Yeah, not that what happened to Laken Riley wasn't tragic, but that shouldn't be elevated to a national stage and used as a fucking pogrom against immigrants.
Exactly. That's all I got on the issue specifically. You got anything else that you wanted to look at?
No, I don't have much more on the issues. I'm running through my notes to try and make sure that I didn't miss
This
anything.
is a very long pod, so shout out to you guys for sticking through it.
Yeah, no, there were a lot of thoughts. If you made it all the way through to this long, comment that shit sucked bigly.
Comment that shit sucked
or
bigly.
Comment that book sucked bigly. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that would be good. But no, I think this might be everything for me. There are some other little petty things that I had highlighted here, but it's just not even. There's so much wrong with the campaign. There was so much wrong with the campaign. I'm sorry. That just goes unaddressed, and that's ultimately what I'm the most unsatisfied with in this entire book.
Yeah. If there's nothing else, I do have one quote to end everybody on that I think is just emblematic of the problem here. Just the uncritical support to some of the worst people alive. It's on page 60, and it's about Dick Cheney. This is the final quote I would like to read, unless there's something else. She's talking essentially in this segment about how VPs can't really do much and how sometimes VPs get more responsibilities, but it's up to the job of the president, right? She says, quote, Jimmy Carter, having lived through the assassination of JFK and the resignation of Nixon, knew that the vice president had to be ready to take over. He remade the role. His vice president, Walter Mondale, was the first to have an office in the West Wing. Ronald Reagan also understood that the vice president needed to be prepared, as did Bill Clinton. George W. Bush went even further, ceding unprecedented power to Dick Cheney. Uncritically throwing in Dick Cheney here.
Just talking about that. That is fucking insane.
Like what and that just captures the entire book to me.
Yeah.
Uncritically mentioning Dick Cheney and his role historically as the vice president, and then just moving on from there.
Man, you know what? Now that you mentioned it, it realized there's a couple other things I have at the end of the book.
Let's get to the end of the book.
That we can read off on. I mean, end of the book, end of the pod, end of the review.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Starting with this quote, because it's 107 days, but she also covers like the day after the election, the day she certified the election, and like just like an general afterwards section.
Yep.
And this one comes from the section of the day she certified, recounting her experience and her feelings then. And I will say I do feel for her. That's a tough position to be in, having to certify your election loss to somebody who is awful. Yeah. Being Donald J. Trump. And she's talking about the process. She's talking about reading it and making it official. And she ends off this section saying, it was one of the most difficult things I have ever done. I stood there and did my duty for democracy, and that day, democracy stood. As I finished speaking, both sides of the aisle rose and applauded as one.
Fun.
For Donald Trump, this is not a bipartisan moment that I'm proud of. This is not a moment where I feel like democracy has really stood in our country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, that's for you to, this is Ivory Towers liberalism to me. This is everything that is wrapped in a sacred hall's like bow.
Yeah. And you've heard everything that we've had to say about how like moderate she ran this campaign and all of the fuck ups. And one of the quotes that got me at the end here was it starts on 296 all the way at the bottom. It's from a journalist who served in the French Resistance. I'm not saying their name because I don't know how to pronounce the last name. Francois something. The quote is, this is how fascism begins. It never says its name. It creeps, it floats. When it reaches the tips of people's noses, they say, is this it? You think? Don't exaggerate. And then one day it smacks them in the mouth and it's too late to get rid of it. You didn't run like that.
No.
If this is what you believed to be the Donald Trump, a potential Donald Trump presidency, why didn't you act like it?
Yeah.
Like, she did call it fascism at one point, but then she like borrowed Trump's policies.
And then it was like too little too late. That was an Anderson Cooper interview. And fuck, it's all coming back to me now. The Anderson Cooper interview, I thought it was funny because that was another instance of look how unfairly I was treated. She talked about Anderson Cooper asked her more questions than the voters, which shit I thought was fucking valid considering the point that we are the unprecedented moment. And then she took a moment to highlight how after she had been talking to voters, she's like, after the town hall, yeah, I went and talked to voters.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's your fucking job, dude. Like, oh no, tomorrow I'm gonna edit video. Like, that's what you do.
Tomorrow I got to prep for a podcast. It's not fair.
That's what you do when you're running for the president of the United States. You talk to voters. Like, it's not like a flex. And I think that liberals often do want praise for the bare minimum that Republicans don't.
I don't even know if it's liberals. I feel like this is just like all politicians want to be celebrated for doing things that are like expected of them.
That's true. That's true. I mean? Yeah.
Especially and not just
Trump does do that too.
Not just when it comes to like accomplishments, but like like you said, just like speaking to voters.
Yeah.
Or like going to a place. Like
yeah, you're
that's
right.
what you're expected to do. And it reminds me of like the White House based campaign, the fucking insane thing that they had set up for Joe Biden. It's like that, like the bare minimum is that you go out and see people. You can't run a campaign from the White House. That's not what a campaign is.
White House based campaign is crazy. And it's like in the 2020 election, a big point was Biden's running the campaign from his basement, and then you plan to run the campaign from his basement. Like you're really just gonna give
that to him? If I had known they said that before, oh my fucking God.
Yeah. You're really just gonna give that to him, dude. That's fucking insane. Yeah. I do, now that I'm looking back at my notes, want to talk about something that happened on page 270 because it's something related to what we talk about often, and that is the West Wingification of American liberalism and politics.
HITO mentioned?
HITO mentioned, maybe, if only. She's talking about like just insults that were happening to her either from Trump or from people that are like at Trump's rallies. And someone at a rally said she worked on a corner. Trump loved that. He laughed and pointed to the guy, encouraging the audience to cheer him. This place is amazing. Show him a gutter, and he crawled right into it. Obviously, that's bad. Obviously, that's deplorable. That fucking sucks. Condemn. She goes on to say, meanwhile, I was on stage in Charlotte with a man who seeks to lift people up. The John Bon Jovi Soul Foundation has been building affordable housing and providing food in the Rockstar Soul Kitchen since 2006. I was proud to have his support as he performed his hits, The People's House and Livin' on a Prayer. It was a case of life imitating art. Bon Jovi appeared as himself in season 7 of The West Wing, singing at a rally for the fictional Democratic candidate Matt Santos. In the series, Santos wins, so I took it as a good omen.
Oh my God, dude.
Just West Wing brain rot, man.
It's not even like, obviously Trump's comments are bad. He has full contempt for women, and that sucks. It's not even that like the John Bon Jovi Foundation work is like bad, like cool, affordable
exactly
housing.
No, it's just corny.
It's just it's corny. It's the total Brandonification of politics. Everybody is Biden, dude.
This is the corny section of the book where we highlight things.
I think Biden might have had a complete political victory or a complete cultural victory. He may have lost the presidency. He may have resigned, or not even resigned. He may have left the race in shame. But Biden had an overwhelming cultural victory because now everybody acts like him. In
Bidenification.
Yeah.
The in Bidenification of the economy. Not
enough people are talking about this.
It's ridiculous. We should write the book on it. We should go run for office and then lose and write a book.
Here's why I lost. Everybody Biden.
Exactly. Everybody Biden, and it's fucked up. Oh, goodness, man. Oh, there's another moment in the afterword where she's talking about capitulation. She has like a good-ish message on capitulation
we talked
and whatnot.
about that with the Rachel Maddow clips last week.
Exactly. So like that's fine. But I think this is just for me. There's a section I underlined where she's talking about the Justice Department is going after Trump's enemies list while Trump supporters have been pardoned and released. January 6 rioters who attacked the police, numerous tax cheats, and the fentanyl dealer Ross Ulbricht. That's the Silk Road guy.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that she calls him a fentanyl dealer and not like the most prolific drug trafficker of the internet age.
Yes, right there.
Because that's what he was. Like the fuck that you're focusing on fent mention.
Yeah, fent mention.
But I will leave this review off on this quote, also from the last few pages of the book, where she says, Gore Vidal called them the 4 most beautiful words in our common language. I told you so. I disagree. I don't think they're beautiful, and I wish I had no cause to say them. This whole book was an I told you so.
Yeah.
This whole book was full of moments of Trump is deplorable, look how deplorable he's acting, referencing the Signal Gate thing, which was actually really funny when she did do that, referencing the Elon Musk breakup with things, referencing all these things, referencing how she was right at every turn when she ended up being wrong and losing the election.
Yeah, she didn't fail, she just was failed.
Exactly.
And again, in the few moments where she recognizes maybe a moment where she fucked up, it's just, I didn't say the right words. And if I would have said the right, she literally says multiple times, like, I meant to say this, and then it's in italics. And it's like, but that sucks too.
Yeah, like your response honestly was worse sometimes.
Yeah, it's just... what a disappointment, man.
What a massive disappointment. Yeah, I fully expected to go into this book feeling better for her, and in some ways I do, and in a lot of ways I don't. In a lot of ways I feel worse and dislike her even more now, especially after that moment she just had on her book tour where she was protested by a Palestinian, and she was like,
I forgot about
blah,
that.
blah, blah, or a Palestinian protester.
So many people like, oh, she's out of office, why are you protesting her? Because she's going to run for office.
Exactly.
And she has sway within the party. If Kamala Harris said something, it would move some Democrats.
Nobody was protesting her before she announced the book tour, too. I'll just leave you to that. Like, she's trying to profit off this.
Yeah,
like, that's a huge part of the equation.
And she got HITO Media LLC's money.
She did. She got my bag, and she's gonna make a fucking bag off this. She will make a killing.
Yeah.
Like I said, the libs are gonna love it. The libs are gonna eat this thing up.
That being said, I would not recommend it. This is a book review. I would not recommend this purchase.
Yeah, I would not. Yeah, no.
You got all the information you need from us. I get maybe you could find a PDF or something to read out.
Yeah, if you really want to look at it.
I would give this 226 stars out of 538. That's a little electoral college joke for you. That was the.
And then both parties from across the aisle stood up and applauded.
Anyways, I think that brings us to the end of this very long book review. Shout out if you made it all the way through.
Yeah.
To our detractors, to the people who have been angry with us. Yes, we bought a book that we intended to criticize. That was the only way to get the book.
It's how you get books. That's also how reviews and criticism happens.
Yeah. But this will be a tax write-off. The public will have paid for this. So in reality, it's the taxpayer that made this episode possible.
Once again, the taxpayer paying for aid to Israel.
Narrative aid, rhetorical aid to Israel.
Rhetorical aid, everything that they've been getting.
Anyways, I think that brings us to the end of the episode here. Kamala Harris's 107 Days. I don't regret reading it. I think it's an interesting look into what the Democratic Party is going to be moving forward. And shout out to you listeners for making stuff like this possible. Yeah. And just tuning into shit like this. This is very niche.
Yeah, no,
This is niche of the niche.
I will tell you, I was profoundly captivated throughout this whole read. Yeah. Not because, I guess, it was a good read. Like, it kept my attention, like, I was interested. I think it's got wicked pacing issues with how often she stops to campaign or fact check at me, which these are things I already know. Yeah. But other than that, definitely interesting.
Yeah, if you're into this stuff like we are, it would definitely be interesting to you. Just because, again, I was looking for these very specific things, and I found myself being led along the thread throughout the book.
Yeah, 100%. But no, a big shout out to the dear listener who's made it all the way through.
That's right.
That's right. Those are the people that keep it running. And speaking of the people that keep it the most running.
Oh, the most running.
I think we have to give a shout out to some very special patrons.
Very important, too.
That help us out over on the Patreon once I get the Patreon list pulled up. Because, we did it a little differently today, and I had book out.
Yeah, he had analog note.
I had book out, pen and paper. And I had notes that I wrote with pen and ink.
Yeah, that's right.
Pen and ink in my hand on paper on a fucking notebook. It's like most of the notebook that I have.
Yeah, I will say marking up a hardcover book feels wrong for a guy like me.
No, I can't lie. I was loving it.
I feel like I shouldn't be writing in a hardcover book, but this isn't going to be like an artifact of anything important.
No, this will live in infamy on my bookshelf for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it'll probably be right up here behind me. You might be able to see it.
Exactly. And I'm keeping my notes that are sticking out of it performatively right on there. Yeah. And it's going to be a good time. Will I ever read it again? No, not front to back, not cover to cover. But will I ever open up certain sections?
Might cite it in 2028.
Exactly. I will cite it. And will I ever maybe look up certain sections in here that I marked with blue to be like things that I found to be bullshit? Yes. Yes, I will absolutely go and look back at my notations and laugh a little bit and give a little ha.
My system for doing it was Biden fucked up, Harris fucked up, and then just like what the fuck moments.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
I
ran out of a lot of sticky notes.
I had purple was like mentions of Joe Biden and like Joe Biden and like things like that. Orange were things that I found were problems with her like campaign and just like problems with her campaign and eventually turned into problems with her fucking mentality about the campaign. Blue was just bullshit. pink was like self-glaze and cringe, and green was insider info. Damn. And there wasn't as much insider info as I thought there was going to be. That shit dropped off starkly after like 80 pages. Yeah. And when the Majority Report covered the review, the guy that they had on that Reddit mentioned that the first 50 pages is really just like, it pretty much sums it up. I couldn't agree more. The 50 pages first 50 were information dense, and there was so much fluff in the rest of it.
Yeah, like the middle 200 pages, she's campaigning at you.
Yeah.
And occasionally mentioning Israel and the right to respond October 7th.
Exactly, and how she fully supports that, even though, look what it fucking turned into, man. Yeah. What a fucking country we have.
Anyhow.
What a future we got to look forward to. And I look forward to looking forward to it with these wonderful people, starting with Caden Kraut, Chris the Postman, Chrissy Beck, Mike Chaplinsky, Clayton LaFed, Mark Yeager, Caleb Joy, Rich Taro, Tari, Fergalaki, Max Vasquez, Jacob Rogers, Colt Mooberry, Fixer Punk, Jim Egbers, Big Burrito, Cincy Elks, Joe Syndrome, Adrian Sandoval, Chloe Sam 601, Colleen Kutch, Jennifer DeVoe, Croft Fission, Benny Bennington III, Alexei Benatti, Big Booty Beatdown, Sam Melody, Ted Cruz's Boy Toy, Dictator Days, Luke O'Shea, Cucker Tarleton, Danielle Jackson, The Word of Microsoft, Jennifer Steins, Aaron and his Gundam Gundams, Darth Father, Tailored for Content, Corey Chambers, Retro Mondo, Veronica, aka V, Raxon, Ass Smith, The Grottler, Murder in a Trenchcoat, Casey Lynn Kelly, AK Gon, Iguana Don, Zach Lantian, Austin Greif, Marcus Corbett, Caleb Roper, Taylor Rensock, Cammy, Tylen Freeman, Isaac Hodges, Madeline C, Anna Valena, KCC, Say Yes to West, August, Particular Bigman, Sir Caplot, Jeff Sines, Brendan's Egg, Froggy Gumtrot, Jackie Boy, Shameless, Coherent Babbles, MJ Sharp, Michaela Muncie, The Wallace 3000,
Chris T, Kashan Lala, Amanda R, Tyler J, Particulon, Memfrez, Rhonda Stiletto, Midwest Marxist, Joe the Mailman, Gary from West Michigan, Shawnee GG, Juniper Not Jupiter, Stacked Crabs, I Crowley, Urban Peach, Lord of Forlorn, Holt Forsyth, Booty Snakes, Dew Fairy, Chelceratops, Austin Lima, Lane Waltz, Azim Feta Hussein, Gorgeous Girl Mukes, Brooklyn G, Noverk the Dastardly, Goldthorn, Addy Book, Merlin, Cryobonky, Sergeant Pookie, Hoodie, Kim Kitsuragi, Rose Grimm, Kristen, James the Young Extremist, Jack the Heathen, Archer W, Evan Mingo, AJ Torres, Elo Nico, Jake Hall, Seth Schmidt, Noah Sajas, Majawat, Ultra the Dragon, Mercy Boku, Dick Cheney and 6-Inch Heels, Luke Wechter, Henry Kraggles, Tristan Rinksmith, Yaya, Asura the Atheist, Aiden Reese, Deep State Agent, Puddle Pirate, Southern Lefty, Lark 61, KC, Cannon Man, Troy H, Rourke Muffalo, Nahan San Diego, Nut Mode, Nick from New Haven, Connor Nix, Sound Logic, Sleven, I Have Never Made a Woman Orgasm, John from Houston, Jordino, Haley Weibold, Pablo Vasquez, Nurse Jen, Soul DJ, Maple, Big Dog, and my mom. Thank you all so much for supporting the show on Patreon.
Yes.
Shout out.
We would not be here reading Kamala Harris' book if it was not for you.
And I mean that.
I would not have picked this thing up. I would not have dropped $30 on it.
That's right. Thanks for listening.
Have a great one.